America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome. This meeting is being recorded and televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. If there's anyone else present who is recording or planning to record, would you please so indicate at this time? Hi, Alana. The first item on the agenda is a consent agenda. That consists of approval of the minutes of December 2nd, 2014, an acknowledgement of 3 finance subcommittee minutes for July 2nd, September 8th, and December 1st. Are there comments, questions, corrections?
There's one typo on the last page of the regular meetings. It should have an R after Parker. Minor, but I noticed it.
It's good that you're paying attention. Okay, any others? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I'd move to approve the consent agenda that includes the minutes of December 2nd as amended, and the Finance Budget Subcommittee minutes from July 2nd, September 8th, and December 1st.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. All right, next up, it's time for our student representative report. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, I will begin. Recently, 2 Chelmsford High School students in the Theater Guild won awards at the Massachusetts Educational Theater Guild, and it took place 2 Saturdays ago on December 6th at St. John's Prep School in Danvers, Mass. There were hundreds of students, I should say, across Massachusetts that entered the competition in areas such as costume design, set design, monologue competition, and scene study. And a senior named Jennifer Arnall placed first in the costume design competition, and also senior Hannah Reif performed her monologue as one of 86 entries and received an honorable mention award. And then next year, Chelmsford will be hosting the Massachusetts Educational Theater Guild Awards at the Carl Rondina Performing Arts Center on February 28th, 2015. And additionally, junior Matt Piper at CHS is involved in a project called the Dream Rocket Project. It's an art project, and the Boston Globe had written an article about it, and it's very interesting. The Dream Rocket Project, I quote, encourages young people to look in and outside of themselves and turn their ideals, experiences, and hopes for the future into art. So the initiative, it's an initiative of the International Fiber Collaborative, and the project will be taking hundreds of thousands of works collected from around the world and constructing them into a 32,000 square foot piece. They'll be wrapped around a replica of NASA's Saturn V moon rocket at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. And this exhibition is planned for May 1st through June 30th of this year. I'm sorry, next year.
Cool.
And for Monty?
We had an amazing winter concert on the 11th, and the chorus, band, and orchestra did an amazing job. There were a lot of new ensembles at Thursdays, which is our new a cappella ensemble or group, and also the percussion ensemble. And this was really special because usually the percussionists are in the back and they're not really seen, but this ensemble really highlighted them, and we got to see how talented they really were. This was Miss Rader's first concert with us at CHS, and she did an incredible job leading the treble choir, the concert choir, and the Thursdays. This has to be one of my favorite concerts that I've ever been to, and it was really special. The medical panel is actually tomorrow, and what you can do is you can talk to other people that are in the medical field. You can ask them questions and, get to know a little bit more, and, this might help you decide whether or not you want to go into that field. And this last new piece of news is my favorite. This last Saturday, the Women of Science competition took place at Bedford High School, and there were 2 teams representing CHS, a senior team and a junior team, and we actually won 3rd place out of 49 teams that were competing there. So I'm really proud of my girls, and we hope to do even better next year.
Wow. Excellent. That's awesome. Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. Okay, time for some good news.
I'll let Dr. Hirsch continue with some good news and reporting out.
Sure.
So a couple of pieces of good news. The first one is Autumn Dolan, who is one of the guidance counselors over at the Parker Middle School, along with Mr. Tom Wright, who's our department coordinator for guidance. They're part of the NEMLEC STARS Crisis Team Recovery. So NEMLEC stands for Northeast Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council, nice new acronym, and they were presented with the Philip L. Mahoney Exceptional Service Award. And this is an appreciation for outstanding support and performance as a member of the NEMLEC schools. And this is where they go in for the crisis teams to help out schools. The other piece of good news is that we have Miss Allie Lacasse and Mr. Sean Wright. They were selected to perform the arrangement of the Star Spangled Banner at the Boston Red Sox game on April 14th. Which is 2015, at Fenway Park. You can pick up your tickets at their concert on the 19th, which is this week.
Thanks. All right. Okay, next on the agenda, we have some time for public comments. This is a time for the school committee to hear public input. The Chelmsford School Committee welcomes public comments, but it is not a time for questions or cross-examination of the committee. As stated in our policy, it is also not a time for debate between speakers in the school committee or between speakers. Is there anyone here who'd like to address the committee at this time? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Oh my goodness. Don't mind me. Nervous.
Don't be nervous.
I'm always nervous speaking in front of people. So, hi. I'm Melissa Normandin, and I am from Chelmsford. I had written this up. I've been watching the school committee meeting for a few years now, and I've come to the opinion that some members of the school committee have seemed to have an agenda they are not making public at the meetings. I came to this conclusion when I noticed that some of the members seem to be bullying the school department employees on Facebook with constant questions to which they should already know the answers. An elected official already in position of power and should not have to resort to cyberbullying to achieve their goals if really above the board. I also noticed that several citizens of Chelmsford keep returning to the podium not to acquire answers but to stir the pot. Please stop the bullying, as it only makes Chelmsford look like an inhospitable community. This is an example that we want to set for our children, mine too. After all, they would face disciplinary action if they attacked a fellow student the same way our citizens are treating the administrative staff of Chelmsford School Department. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming out.
Glenn Diggs, 220 Wellman Avenue. I'd like to speak on two areas. The first is part of the presentation of John O'Sullivan at the last meeting centered on the fact that he intimated, unknown to anyone, is that the iPads and laptops were the most checked out items in the Learning Commons.
I will remind you that this is not a time for debate between speakers.
It's not a debate. It's just a clarification, that's all.
I'm not sure that's really what we're looking for. If
It was
This is a
intimated that
diffi-
these were the items that are most checked out, which I agree with. However, it didn't explain the exact reason why. That's all I'm going to explain. And the reason is that from a control standpoint, any class that comes to the Learning Commons, if there are 30 students and they want to use iPads, 30 iPads are checked out to them. If they want to use laptops, there are 30 laptops checked out to them. Doesn't matter how long they have them, which means that if 5 classes come to the library in any given day, there's 150 checkouts, and it's for control purposes. So, and that wasn't intimated, and it was just intimated that the most item checked out were those items. It implied that there were not other materials.
I appreciate your clarification, and I respect the fact that you're bringing additional facts and insight to light. If you could do it with a little bit less direct opposition, perhaps, direct clash, then I think that would be helpful.
All right, then from a different standpoint, I want to read a letter that was addressed to the school committee that was sent by Kathleen Dempsey Zimmerman, who's an English teacher in the system for 30 years. Dear School Committee, the situation at Chelmsford High School since the abrupt dismissal of Val Diggs, a knowledgeable librarian, and her 2 other colleagues, head of science and English, has been difficult to say the least, disheartening, demoralizing, and perhaps illegal. But to that, then add outright lies when reporting the situation at last night's school committee meeting, meaning the last meeting that we had, on camera for the general public, compels this letter as I don't know what else to do. Regardless of what untruths John Sullivan reported, the library is not functioning as it did when we had our talented, knowledgeable teaching professional, certified librarian Valerie Diggs. Yes, the space is still there, and the kids float in and out, but the heart and soul of Chelmsford High School academic program is gone. Instruction in research, plagiarism, reliability of sources, navigating databases, quoting sources, submitting papers to Turnitin, and excitement for the possibilities of learning from the myriad of sources made available by Valerie, from radio programs to NPR, conferences to the latest in research sources of any kind, all of this and more is now non-existent. I have been teaching English for over 30 years. I am a professional who cares deeply about the quality of education. I, as a professional, love of learning, and we as a professional English department deliver. The Common Core standards are solid in their attempts to get students college ready, particularly in writing. We used to do this when we had Valerie Diggs as the librarian. That is her field. She's a nationally renowned expert in that field. We are so lucky to have her, and I said that every single time I brought my students to her for instruction, we at CHS had a great marriage. It's no secret that we have lost English positions over the past several years due to budget cuts. We have a heavy load, a lot of students and a lot of classes to teach. Trying to teach writing along with literature and critical thinking skills takes all of the teacher's time. But we had Valerie who could teach all the research skills, and she did. She was a teacher for many years and is a most effective teacher. She loves teaching, working with kids. Why is it that administrators, by and large, do not value the expertise of their professional teachers? Why don't they understand that professional expertise and experience make a profound difference in the quality of instruction that is delivered? Valerie teaches library research skills at the college level, and she is so highly suited to teach Chelmsford High School students. She cannot be replaced by an aide who looks at some direction and then passes them on to the students. It is Valerie's professional training that makes her so capable. English teachers are not taking their students to the learning commons as usual, not by any stretch. I, for one, do not have the time to learn all the library research skills in addition to doing my job as an English teacher, teaching kids how to read, write, think, expand their vocabularies, read literature, and learn discussion skills, etc. My students cannot afford the time away from our regular in-class instruction to spend classes in the learning commons with subpar instruction, so they will not get the skills that would be so helpful to them in college. I am so sorry that our superintendent has let Ms. Diggs go. We can limp along without a department head for a while, I suppose, but we cannot replace what has been lost in the education we deliver to our kids by removing the heart and soul of our research, instruction, and all of that entails. In my mind, Dr. Hano has made a huge mistake, as the Learning Commons is nowhere near the valuable resource it was while Mrs. Diggs was working there every day. The quality of our high school education has been greatly diminished. Again, sincerely, Kathleen Dempsey Zimmerman, and the letter can also be found on the Chelmsford In-Town Report.
I believe it can also be found in the Lowell Sun. Are you endorsing the letter? Is that why you're reading it tonight?
I'm reading it, she could not be here, and felt that she needed to say that. Again, you're saying that it shouldn't be a debate or a head-to-head.
I'm trying
But
to avoid
this
the
is a person-
head-to-head.
This is a person who works in the system, is independent.
I agree with that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at this time?
I've spoken publicly before. I'm Maureen Foley, and I'm a 20-year resident. I have had 4 children graduate from CHS. Very proud of the school system. It's the reason I moved to town. I do not currently have anyone in the school system. I'm a town meeting rep, and I'm the head of the children's department at the public library. And for all those reasons, I'm here tonight. And Mike, this is the first time that I had planned to speak. Other times, it's just been I've jumped to a mic. And this is the first time I planned to speak, but I'm not sure of the rules. So I'm not going to be on script anymore.
I think what we're trying to avoid is direct head-to-head confrontations. We'd like to hear your point of view. We'd like
Okay.
to hear your perspective.
Okay.
And we're always interested in
Okay, good.
in an approach that sheds additional light on the situation. So we're happy to hear what you
Okay.
have to say.
Okay. Just a really brief recap from my understanding of this very complex situation. That there was a budgetary shortfall. And in order to pay bills from last year, money was used from this year. And therefore, right at the beginning of the school year, it just appeared that there was going to be a pretty substantial shortfall this year. And as a result of that money, a decision was made that 3 positions would be eliminated, and therefore 3 people lost their job, lost their livelihood that day. So in all the meetings that I've come to, it seems to me that predominantly we've been talking about money, rightly so. We've been straightening out the books. I have heard the superintendent apologize for this entire situation, and there have been promises made that we are going to get it under control. As a town meeting rep, I was someone that voted to give the school department additional funds so that we could pay those bills, pay the ones that were unpaid, and it was a lot of money. And you were all there that night, and you know how upset I was to make that decision, knowing that it wouldn't automatically restore those 3 positions, because I couldn't understand that. I'm still having trouble understanding that. I would appreciate it if anyone could try to explain it to me tonight. When I sit down, that's fine. It is still my struggle, because I need to know that all of you are as concerned about this as I am. That I know you are concerned about the money. You have taken steps to make sure that financially we won't be in this position again. I am assured of that, and I trust it. I need to know that we're working on restoring these positions. Bringing Valerie is the one I know the most about, because I work with her. She's a colleague of mine. I work in the public library. She works in the school. The public library lost our teen librarian in October, and so we were at a point that there weren't any people in town that were specifically working with the teens. Really happy to report that we do have a teen specialist on board now, and that's great, but she's now looking to partner with the schools as we go forward. Okay. I don't know what it is that you folks have been telling me is confidential. I need assurances that something is being done, that creative thinking is being brought to this situation, that you recognize the pain in the community, that it hasn't been fixed, that the money has been brought back, but the people have not been brought back. There's been, I really appreciate that letter. Actually, I did read that letter before I came tonight. Really great letter. It warms my heart as a librarian. I have to tell you just for a minute that most people don't know what librarians do. Honestly, they don't. They think they check in and out books, okay? And I have a master's degree in library and information science. And so I paid $20,000 and went to Simmons, I got that degree, and the first thing I did was give away the information I learned. Now, that's exactly what teachers do. That's exactly what teachers do. They spend a lot of money, they learn as much as they can, and they give it away. The one thing I give away more than a teacher is my title. I give away librarian. Give it away like water. Anyone that works in a library is used to saying, I'm a librarian. And that's great with me because we're a team. And it's only on a night like tonight that I have to tell you, there is such a thing as a degreed librarian. And to get the degree, you have a master's degree, and you go through a program with an accredited school. And so I'm sitting here as a accredited, degreed librarian saying it's a whole lot more than checking in and out books, which is why that letter was so valuable to the community, because I don't think the community understands why I am so passionate about this. Why would I be in front of mics as many times as I have been if I thought that the community as a whole understood the job of a librarian? And so the good news is that this controversy has helped this community understand the importance of librarians. And for that, I am truly grateful. And because the community now understands it, they are looking to you, the administration, and to the school committee to support this, to bring back the high school librarian. However it is that you can do it. So my question tonight, and I heard you, Mike, say that questions weren't that great, but if I was going to ask a question, the question would have been to Dr. Tiano to give me a timeline so that I would be assured that this is happening. I would have asked for a timeline. When do you expect the high school librarian to be back in the Learning Commons? Because we've restored the budget that was the beginning of the situation when she left. The money's back. I want the people back. So I need an understanding of why they haven't already been back, and I would really appreciate a timeline. It's a bit difficult for me to come in front of you this evening and speak before I hear all of your deliberation, because I know one of the things on the agenda tonight is superintendent goals. I don't know what that means, okay? You might be talking about 5-year plan. I have no idea. I'm going to ask you tonight to set a goal for the superintendent, short term, okay? If I was running the world, it would be 30 days. I would say the goal is 30 days from now, we have a high school librarian in Chelmsford High School again. Thank you.
If I may, just
Yeah.
just a minute. No, I'm not, and I don't mean to, I'm not going to cross-examine you either.
No, that's okay. You can
But
discuss it
just-
with me.
Just so that you understand, I think we're not going to give you a direct answer
Okay.
right now, right? This
Okay.
is a time for us to listen to public
Right,
input.
right.
We do have a financial update as the first item on the agenda, and I think there will be, as we discuss the financial update, there will be an opportunity for members of the committee to respond to some of the questions you've asked and the issues you've raised. So if you
Okay.
want to stick around for that, I think
I would
you'll-
like to. As
you'll
I
get
say,
some
it's
insights.
hard for me to talk before listening.
It is
So,
it is difficult, and that's one of the reasons that we prefer not to have a true debate, because
Right.
you're at a little bit of a disadvantage.
I don't know what
haven't
you're gonna
heard
say.
what we have, and so what we're trying to do is to take it in.
Okay.
And consider it.
Okay.
And then, yeah, but it's reasonable to expect a response at some point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the committee?
The moral of the story is you shouldn't have picked the library.
I think many of you probably remember I've been here before. I'm Sandy Kelly. I spoke as a past president of the Massachusetts School Library Association. I know you received a letter, or you should have received a letter from Judy Paradis, who's the current president. And I have to be honest, I wrote a letter, and I'm here to read it because I submitted it to the Lowell Sun, not having a clue about the previous letter that the teacher wrote. So as I read the letter, I might add some casual comment, but it's a statement that I think is important to hear even if you don't read the Lowell Sun. So it was addressed to whom it may concern. This letter is written in response to a recent statement at the December 2nd school committee meeting. Mr. John O'Sullivan, a technology integration teacher, addressed the school committee. He is currently assigned to supervise the Learning Commons at Chelmsford High School to replace the certified school library teacher, Valerie Diggs. She was released from her position in October as a result of the recent financial situation. I know you all know that, but the people might not. So, it was clear that Mr. O'Sullivan appreciates the smooth daily operations of the Chelmsford High School Learning Commons and the respectful culture and the hard work of the students who use it each day. His comment was a tribute to the dedication that Valerie Diggs brought to her job at the high school as library director for the past 20 years. It's clear it's a result of her hard work. Valerie transformed what was once a dingy pass-through, and it was, I saw it. It had bright yellow walls and torn carpet. It was a dumping ground for old AV equipment and outdated books. It is now a nationally acclaimed, modern, beautiful, and inviting learning commons. He eased into his transition checking out books and iPads due to the efficient procedures and routines that were established and the careful curation of the resources that Mrs. Diggs purchased and housed in the library collection. It was actually a compliment he was giving her. As a technology teacher, Mr. O'Sullivan noted that the top item he checks out daily are the laptops and iPads. Again, this is a tribute to the person who was the administrator of the program. It would be foolish to think that in a high school, technology is not the tool of choice for a generation of kids who have never lived in a world without it. I respect Mr. O'Sullivan's wish to speak on his own behalf, and I really do admire any teacher that's passionate about their work. Education, as you probably have noticed, is a passion of mine. However, in this case, he offered a challenge for anybody to prove that things hadn't changed. And I would like to clear any misperception that the public might have that the only thing school librarians do are check out laptops and iPads. Very not so. One of the main purposes of a learning commons is to provide open and equitable access to multiple tools and technologies for every student. While the book was a chosen tool of a past generation, today's kids mainly choose technology. And just like a book, an iPad or a laptop is just a tool. It's a means to an end when you do research and you're looking for accurate information. A Pew Research report as far back as 2009 reported that 93% of teenagers ages 12 to 17 go online. The real issue that needs to be addressed here is the accuracy. Print books are research. They're edited and revised numerous times before they go to publication. It's time-intensive and costly to publish good information in hard copy. Today, anyone can publish anything they want on the internet, any one of you or I, whether you're an expert or not. No one is editing, no one's gleaning bias or errors in data or even the credibility of the author. It's free, it's easy, and frequently if something is free, you get what you pay for. Little of significant value. Much of the scholarly and researched information online today does not come from a Google search. Unfortunately, according to a 2012 Pew report, 94% of teachers responded to a survey saying that their students equate research with using Google. The teachers in the study were predominantly teaching advanced placement classes. Yuck. Credible research and information is protected under intellectual property and copyright law. If it's online and it's free for you to access, someone is paying for it. It's the state, it's your own community, or it's your school. So the real concern at Chelmsford High School in the Learning Commons, and my challenge to Mr. O'Sullivan, is that who is teaching? Who's qualified to teach the students and their teachers how to access the dependable information, interpret it, and detect bias, and use information in the ethical manner that's expected in college? And who is integrating these skills into the real actual assignments? Who's purchasing and curating resources? Do they have training and access to professional review subscriptions? Do they even know they exist? And most importantly, who is assessing the students' learning? Are the kids really being taught how to research and think about information? In educational terms, it is asking you, is there any real metacognition going on in the school library? A certified school librarian has rigorous education on how to do all of these things. School librarians are continually re-educating themselves and networking because of the constantly changing rules, regulations, and the technology itself. Just last week, a group of librarians on our executive board trained on a new initiative for an e-book project, which is going to be released statewide. A few weeks prior to that, and I would like to refer this one to Mr. O'Sullivan, who commented that teaching citations is no big deal. He was an English teacher. A few weeks ago, there was a forum discussion going on between librarians about how to cite a Skype conversation. Think about it. It was a question that a high school librarian was asked. Those are the kinds of things that librarians are doing and the questions that we're answering. And to be honest, before I came to this meeting, I have to tell you, I did. I Googled it. How to cite a Skype conversation. I instantly got back 404,000 results. A typical kid would look at the first three. The first three did not answer the question. So using my librarian skills, I did an exact term search and I put quotation marks around it. It said there was no response. I know how to find the answer, though. Anyway, I brought to you a statement that I'm going to pass out. In 2007, the president of the Mass Computer Using Educators, MassQ, and the president of the Mass School Library Association, who was myself at the time, worked collaboratively and collegially on a joint statement called School Library and Technology Services for Schools in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I cited the document. I brought each of you copies, so you have your own. It was voted on and approved by both executive boards of the organization, and the goal was to define and differentiate the common and unique aspects of both of our jobs. It would be unfortunate to think that educators in 2014, who have the same common purpose, the good of our kids and the students, would not be working together collegially and collaboratively to move forward. These are the very 21st century skills that businesses are asking us to produce in our students. We should be modeling this kind of behavior for our kids. Valerie is a highly qualified school librarian who additionally teaches school librarianship at 2 colleges. Removing her as the high school librarian was a clear indication of lack of knowledge and insight into the program she created. I go on to quote a National Commission on Libraries, and I know I'm preaching probably to a choir of people who understand that school libraries really do produce academic achievement. There's been a lot of continuous and consistent research, and interestingly, one of the studies was actually done right at Simmons, where Valerie has been an adjunct. Anyway, school librarians are teachers, information specialists, program administrators, instructional partners, and inspiring leaders. They bring a higher meaning to the expression, a great bang for your buck. As you prepare a new budget, I urge the school committee to consider the importance of this position at all levels in your district. Information literacy should be started with the youngest students as well, and it should be scaffolded through all the grades so it's a seamless part of their education. School librarians are valued by NEASC, you know who they are. They're valued by the Department of Education. They recently added guidelines for administrators to be able to better evaluate school librarians, knowing you probably don't really know how to evaluate one. And school librarians are also valued by a significant group of legislators in the state. They are now beginning an assessment of all the school library programs across the state. And finally, based on the continuous discussions in the social media and online and in newspapers about Valerie being reinstated to her job, it's obvious that the students who wrote petitions, that the parents who comment online, that the taxpayers who make comments, and now even the teachers are making comments. People valued your school library learning commons at the high school and Valerie Diggs' contribution. I hope you seriously consider any means of returning this position immediately so any student does not miss out on the real mission of the effective school library program. Your investment and the integrity of your Learning Commons resources will be otherwise jeopardized. I'm sure you're tired of hearing that, but I will pass out the joint statement. The president of MassQ at the time was Walter McKenzie. Walter is now an advisor at ASCD in Washington, D.C. He was a technology director and assistant superintendent and a very respected national speaker now. I just also want to make a personal comment before I leave. Listening to the comments and not living in town, I have nothing here to gain except providing good school library programs in the state. And I think it's important. But one of the things that concerns me from past comments is there seems to be a little bit of an undercurrent of competition in your district between technology and the school library role. And to be honest, that's why in 2007, that's why Walter McKenzie and I wrote this statement for both the organizations and asked them to approve it, to buy into the fact that we both have different missions. Some of the things we do are the same, but one job is not more important than the other. They're equally important, and to be honest, today, kids that are coming out of training programs for school librarianship are actually getting their technology integration certification as well. The gal that replaced me a year and a half ago did, and she's not alone. There's a lot of them. So, the technology is important, but we have different roles in technology, and for that gentleman to imply that things are running smoothly.
So I very much appreciate your comments, your insights. Again, if we could if we could just do without calling other people names or denigrating their opinions, I think we're all well served by that. Most of us can understand what it is you're saying.
Okay, and I hope you don't think I was calling anybody out. I mean, I have a real interest in education and the profession, and I'm still involved in the Working Group for Educator Excellence in the state. And I will be frank, I just feel like, he was making reference as well, and he presented a challenge. And honestly, illusions of grandeur are present. So, I'm sorry. I know that was a dig. Okay, I'll leave now.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at this time? Seeing none, we will move along. The first item under new business is the FY15 financial update. Dr. Tiano, do you want to set this up?
Sure. You're first going to hear from Mr. Antonelli, and he's going to be talking about where we are in the process of looking at FY15 and our financials. Talk a little bit about our budget process going forward into FY16. In your packet, you also have a handout from Ken Sterlazzi, our HR director, in terms of substitutes. Frank also is going to talk about activity accounts, too, that the committee was curious in, including the activity accounts for our sports teams as well, and where that money goes. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Frank.
I'm disappointed that I don't have financial reports to share with the school committee tonight. I was a bit under the weather this past week for a couple of days, didn't report to work, and the school's accountant was also not feeling her best and was out for a couple of days. That being said, I do want to assure the committee that we are working hard to get those reports together and to disseminate them as quickly as possible first through the Finance Subcommittee and then through the School Committee. We did have a meeting with John Sullivan today to review the reports that we'll be submitting to the School Committee, as well as the formulas that he used to give you that comprehensive report. And we're going to spin off of his report so that you get all of the information that you need. We'll be providing 3 reports from the general fund. One will be a summary report, which will just be a one-pager, which will be very quick and easy to look at and read. The next will be a report by state function codes, and then the third report will be the detailed report that you're accustomed to seeing from Mr. Sullivan. In addition to those reports, we'll be providing a report for revolving accounts as well as all of your state grants. The school accountant and I will be meeting with the town accountant this week as part of our, it has been weekly, but now it's been a bi-weekly meeting to review our chart of accounts and to ask questions and clarify our financial reports so that we're on the same page as the town is. So we'll be doing all of that, and I did want to mention to you that I think that the FY16 budget is going along very well. We have had a few meetings with all of our administrators. We have provided training to our administrators so that they can put the information into the Munis accounting system. Many of them have had follow-up questions. We have scheduled another meeting with our administrators for next week so that they can meet, the principals can meet with the coordinators, and then we'll be talking again the following week with the central office administrators to review FY15 accounts. So we're deep into the budget process. It's going along smoothly. I think that the administrators are excited, if I can use that word, about doing a budget. They're excited about being more involved in the budgetary process, developing the budget, and actually having a say in controlling their so-called destiny in the budget. So that is all going along very well, and I would like to share with you a report, I should say, that I received from the high school concerning the student activity accounts. As you know, that's okay, they can go that way.
We already have them.
That's all right, I've got 3, and you can pass them on to the young man there. He should take a look at it. It is the high school account, so public information. So basically, I have talked with Charlie Clary and Rob Russo, who are responsible for reviewing these accounts. As you know, you have not had a report that shows you a reconciliation of these accounts, so this is the first one that we're showing to you. It's for a 2-month period. There's one in October and there's one in November. It lists all of the accounts at the high school. This is based on a template that I had given to Rob and to Charlie that I've seen work successfully in other school districts. On the left-hand side of the report up top, you see what the checking account opening and closing balances were, which include deposits and expenses. On the right-hand side of the top of the report show the savings accounts. Those two combined, the reconciled balance, should agree with the bottom line that you see in the lower right-hand corner of the report, which it does. So these are all of the amounts that each individual club has. You will notice in October that there are some negative balances there. You will also see a description in the email that Rob sent me about those negative balances. And when you turn over to November, you will see that some of those negative balances have been erased and are now in a positive fashion, positive account balance. This report, as I said, is the first one that we've used. The middle school principals are also very anxious, not anxious, but very, very excited about getting a report together for the school committee. I have met with both principals. One of the schools has sent me a draft report. I just haven't had time to go over there yet, but we'll be doing that soon. Get it in a finalized form. We'll be including it when we send those other reports out to you. and I know that the other middle school is very interested in getting on board as well. I've had a meeting with them, and we will get that all straightened out so that you will have that information as soon as possible. All right. Any questions?
Well, let me just ask about the negative balances.
Yes.
And it mentions here the rationale is that that some of these groups had deadlines that they needed to pay by, and that they just hadn't done their fundraising yet. Let me ask you: is that a common occurrence?
Sometimes it happens, but as I said to Rob and to Charlie, we really want to avoid that at all costs. We don't want to be going in the red in any accounts. One of the accounts that was in the red was the yearbook account.
Right.
And that was just because the money hadn't started coming in.
Right.
That got erased.
So I can imagine that in a normal year, you might have expenses at the beginning of the year, and you don't get the revenue till the end of the year. How does something like that work? Where does the money come to cover that?
In this particular case, and in all cases, really, when you're talking about a set of student activity accounts, you do have the principal's account in here, as you have noticed, and that is sufficient to cover those types of expenses. But they're working on it, they're getting the fundraising, and Rob has assured me that he will be able to get that money, and those accounts will go in the black.
These are the same questions we asked this morning at
right.
the meeting, because we were concerned about it, and the understanding that I got is, and I actually spoke to someone this evening, is basically what happens is, especially in a sport, for example, that is a winter sport, they borrow some of the money in the fall timeframe, and then they really can't do any fundraising until the team is established. In other words, they made this team is
Right.
selected, and now they do their whatever fundraising and do whatever they have to do, and they'll do that through their season or whatever. That's and that makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think the same situation goes, for example, with the band. The band had, they ended up going to Florida. So, and that was probably a fairly expensive trip, and
Right.
and they fundraise throughout the whole year, so I'm sure that they pay that down. But I think, as Frank mentioned, I think the best bet is going throughout the year, is going forward into the future. They have to try to,
Yeah,
prevent that from happening.
to the extent that that's possible, but.
Right, as best we can. In having the discussion, and I know we're probably going to say something about this, because instead of waiting till the liaison, I think it's a good opportunity.
It's most appropriate to
Right,
have the
to do it
discussion now.
So two things we discussed really at the meeting. We discussed the FY15, and Frank explained, where we were. One of the questions we asked was, now that, as a matter of fact, this stack here, some of the questions we had about this, now that we all the funds cleared from town meeting, we're paid off some of the bills, it's adjusting some of the line items, as well as part of the exercise of FY16 in determining which teachers and members of the staff are in which buildings. Remember, there was a few discussions. That's helped out to adjust the FY15 lines as well. So we asked Frank to make sure that as soon as he has that, updated copy, hopefully within a week or so, he's going to shoot it off to Evelyn and I, and we can start having fun with it, basically chewing through it. On the FY16 part of the budget, we talked about basically, where we were. I mentioned at the last meeting that I was concerned about the compression of the schedule and how difficult it was. Frank reassured me again today that, they're on schedule, they're making progress, and they feel comfortable still with their date. So as part of our concern to make sure that we don't get to the end date where we said we need to be done by X, and then, we're going to be 2 more weeks. It just can't happen.
Right, we're too tight.
Right, we're behind the 8 ball, so that's got to happen. As part of additional discussions, obviously, part of what Frank mentioned earlier, where everyone's excited about it, it's because we're finally doing a true needs budget. So all the needs in the district, whatever those are going forward, we're going to get into that budget, and we're going to try to recover where we have to recover. I guess that's the best way of me putting it without making any specific, because I'm not going to speak for the administration or the staff. But at the appropriate time, we will ask the appropriate questions about, what those needs are.
Well, I think
Right.
we discussed some of that at the last meeting, as
Right.
far as what we wanted to have added
Put
to
in.
the FY16 budget to get a clearer picture of exactly what the real cost is of educating our students, rather than having parents pay for supplies, and then PTOs pay for supplies, and then other people go to the council of schools for supplies, and a variety of things along that line. So that was discussed, and was also discussed at the last meeting about making sure that the positions that were eliminated this year, that they made it back into the budget for next year, because they are, they're important positions, and we want to make sure that it is budgeted for at that point. I'll speak to that in a minute. But when you take a look at the handout that Frank had given you, if you take a look at one side versus the other side, you can see that things are changing, and some of the ones that were in the red are now either zero or in the black, so you can see that there is a change from that month, and I'm certainly sure that when we see the next set, that you'll see a progression towards everyone being able to balance what it is, and I think, it's very straightforward. It's something that I've never seen. It's been a lot of years. So it's nice to, thank you very much for at least having a template that can be used so that everything can be a lot clearer for the school committee members with regard to that. So these documents, when we do the subcommittee minutes, or when I do the subcommittee minutes from this morning, then I'll attach that document to it, just so people have an understanding, with an explanation in the minutes.
I have no real objection to that, but would it be helpful if we could also put it perhaps on the high school website? And with the middle school activity accounts, maybe they could go on the appropriate middle school websites as well?
No, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, have an accounting so that
Yeah.
people can see it.
And one of the things that we've put up on the website at the committee's request also has to do with the specific counts, kind of the data behind
Right.
the numbers that Frank had just presented. I don't have a paper copy for you, but Anne Marie, if you just put it on the screen, just in,
Dr. Tiana presented a couple of pages of the report just to show us, and it's the detail with the pluses and minuses of the accounts.
So
Just
this is-
something that everyone's asked about.
So this just comes from Mr. Russo, who keeps track of all the accounts, and through Mr. Moreau to me, to you folks. And this is something that we'd make available online. I know folks had questions, and this is just the fundraising portion of it. So where the money comes in. So this is from July 1st, 13 through December 5th, and so this is for the committee to view. And for the public to view as well. So as Mr. Antonelli was talking about, on a monthly basis, providing you folks with the balances of the revolving accounts, we can provide the backup in a relatively easy fashion, and now have that template to provide for you.
And
So,
it's,
And
and it's
where-
sorted sorted by activity, so if you'll see, volleyball or football or whatever, boys volleyball or girls volleyball.
it's right
so
by
it-
team.
It's sorted by account.
Where is it on the website, Anne Marie?
Right on the front page where it says, recent, for budget documents, please visit the business website. Just click that on the front page and it goes right to it.
So as we're working through as a team, putting together what this template looks like going forward for the next teen years, and is putting together our budget procedures and providing you with that information. Here's just another piece of it.
Al?
Is any of the principal's account budgeted?
Yeah,
What do you
what does he
mean?
use
Do-
it for?
Do you mean in the general fund, or do you mean in this
Well, out
account
of
here?
the-
Oh,
out of the- out of
are
our
there
general
expenses,
budget, yeah.
are there expenses that he is anticipating within that principal's account? Yes, there are expenses. I can't tell you exactly what those expenses are, but
No, I'm talking about the source of revenue. Do we, in our budget, put any money in the
oh,
principal's
no,
account?
no, no, no.
Well, it seems to me that if not there, someone else, we need to put some. And the reason being, two of the large amounts where was a shortfall is the yearbook. And we're talking big money every year. They can't, in my opinion, produce the yearbook and raise $5,000 to $10,000 before they sell the yearbooks.
Right. But it.
Right, if we're gonna-
But it gets, what, I think what we're saying is that that's one of those accounts that is paid out throughout the year and it balances out to zero.
But it may,
Yeah,
but it may
aren't we
take.
paying, I thought I understood that we're using the principal's account
No, just,
for some of these areas in order to pay the bills when the activity account doesn't have enough money.
well, if I can just clarify that. I mean, the bottom line on the student activity account is that there's a balance of $181,000.
Yeah,
And that on occasion, it may happen that some account has to go into the red. And usually, the account that you would look at that would cover that type of expense would be your principal's account.
okay. But what I'm saying is that we're going to be guaranteed, unless something drastically changed, every year, a $5,000 or whatever shortfall for the yearbook, and there's a pretty good chance that we're going to have the band trip. There's going to be something else, whether it's DECA or, in the history of the club, that these are trips. And,
I think Al's making a good point, that if we know that there are first of all, if our goal is never to have any of these accounts in the red, and we know that at least in several of them, there are big upfront costs that happen at the beginning of the year before the fundraising can be done, then it might be a good idea to make a one-time deposit into the principal's account that can be used so that, and then the principal can disperse it to the yearbook. So, and the yearbook's just gonna have to keep a positive balance in it.
Or reimburse the other accounts.
At the end of each year, it needs to have built up a positive balance, and I think that's what you're asking about. Do they
and the
have
other thing
budgets
is, I'm not sure,
associated?
the 10,000, I'd be interested to know where that comes from. Having been in that position, the only money I ever felt I had were donations, virtually. I mean, I don't know where that came from if we're not putting any in. And so if it is not necessarily donation that somebody gives $500, but, some parts of profits from other things or whatever, that's more than I remember having.
Yeah, that could be, one of the accounts, I think, too, one of the ways they've generated funds into that account recently in the last couple of years is this Stop and Shop thing that they've done.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
But if that's the case, and this is my point, if those are all quote-unquote donations of one form or another, that's not guaranteed.
Oh, right, that's.
And so that's another concern I would have. If that's dependent upon, something other than budget, it's misleading that we can rely on.
Is
Well,
there
it's not- I don't
is there a
think we
limit
rely.
in what this account can hold?
There are two different accounts that you're looking at. One is the checking account, and the other is the savings account. By statute, the school committee has to vote a limit, which you have done, and I believe that it is on the page here. The amount authorized, right under the checking account, is $60,000. That was authorized, that's the checking
Yes.
account.
Right.
That was authorized by the school committee. I'm not sure the date.
Yeah,
but
that
it
sounds
probably
about right. No,
was
that's
the past few years.
embedded in policy.
Here's the other problem that we have is,
Well,
here's an example. If we decide to allocate, let's pick a number, out of our standard budget general funds, $10,000 into the principal account, that has to be spent in the year. If it's not spent in the year, it's got to be given back. You understand? Because in the fiscal year, you can't carry money over in an account somewhere. We can't carry money over, right? That's the way I understand the rules are. Well, you're
Right.
you're the rule boss.
Right, right, and also, if you want to know where we got the numbers that Frank is referring to, it's policy 4304. So it is embedded in policy, in case you wanted to know what it was.
So when Mr. Caleri making his budget for his building last year, did he budget himself $10,000?
No.
No.
No, I think that
Year
money.
before that?
My understanding is that money has
Can't do
been
that.
carried over
Right.
from previous years.
Yeah.
Which they can do that because
In
we're
the
not putting it
student
in our
activity
budget,
account.
it's
This is
separate.
a revolving account, so whatever you don't spend, just gets carried right over.
And it's not our money.
So this,
don't control that money.
this money that he has in this account, some of it probably comes from interest that was earned in previous years and has accumulated.
That's a lot of
But it's
interest.
not budget money. In other words,
I
it's not money
understand
we
that,
throw
but
in there
that's,
because we
that's
can't.
part of my concern.
But we can't put budget money in there.
Right, but I think,
Unless we have items that he needs to put in that are outside, that become part of the budget and not part of what he uses monies from his principal fund. So he may pull money out for some activity that he determines is important in that one fiscal year, that's his prerogative, and he may take it, because it's now budgeted, he may take it out of his principal fund. But the way I understand it is we don't budget something at all and account for money coming out of there.
but I think
No,
that the
not at all.
original,
Well,
the original
now I'm really
question,
confused.
right, but the original question is where did it come from?
That's money that's been raised.
No.
No,
He
if
talked
I may-
about my checking account as principal, that he has $60,000. Where is that?
If I
I'm sorry
may-
to be a pain in the
No,
neck.
No, yeah,
it's
no,
not-
no, you're
it's
asking a
not
good
at all.
question.
We're going to have a lot more conversations like this.
Well, in the policy,
Let's let.
Hold on.
want to
let-
just have
let
the,
Frank
oh,
answer
okay,
it.
I was going to tell you what it's.
So, I can't remember how many years ago it was that this law was established. The school business officials were involved in drafting it. And the way they drafted it is they said, okay, you have two separate accounts. One is the agency checking account, and any expense that you have will go from that account, will be paid out of that account. And there's a limit to how much money you may have in that checking account. And the school committee is going to establish that limit for each student activity account. So, as an example, you've established a limit of $60,000. You can't exceed that $60,000 limit for the high school. You also have a policy there, Evelyn has a copy of it in front of her, that has a different dollar amount for your middle schools, because the activity isn't as great in your middle schools as it is in the high school. So you've just established a maximum amount that that checking account can have. What happens is, as that money gets depleted, then they go to the town treasurer, and they ask the town treasurer to give them some money to replenish that account, to bring it back to that level where it was. And she's getting that money, or he, in this case, the town treasurer, is getting that money from deposits that the high school activities have been giving into the town. So they've set up a separate account, a separate savings account. That money's going in there. They have a separate checking account. When that checking account gets down lower, then the money goes back in through a request through the town treasurer.
It has nothing to do with budget.
Our budget.
Our budget.
Is it a single account or each of these individual accounts?
You mean, is the $60,000?
Well, that's the
That's an
60,000
aggregate.
is an
An
aggregate,
aggregate,
yeah.
and it is replenished from deposits from who? Who makes the deposit? The individual?
All
So
of these
the-
clubs are out doing
So the Fine Arts
fundraising.
Club
Yes.
deposits all of their funds that they raise into a single global account.
Into the savings account, that's correct.
And then they're given access to an
And then it's
amount
recorded
that is
here.
equal to what
Exactly.
they've raised.
That's why this sheet is so important, because this tells you how much money each one of these clubs has at any time. So you should do this every single month and check on those balances and make sure that they're accurate. And that's what he's done for these 2 months. And it's a good report to have for the school committee to see. There is, this is the first time I'm bringing this report to the school committee. I'm going to change it slightly by putting down here on the bottom of the page, if we can squeeze it in somehow, that this has been signed by Rob Russo. It has been signed by the principal at the high school. It has been signed by the business manager, and it has been signed by the superintendent of schools. So you know that 4 sets of eyes have gone over this document, and it is before you for approval.
So we shouldn't need to put any money in to deal with these shortfalls, because the principal can write a check to cover it, then the people raise the money, whatever the organization is, send it to the town side, and then they put it back in the account.
That's right. That's why you see both of
So
these,
we're okay to cover things.
both of these accounts
won't run-
total $181,000. And you can see, when you add all of these up, that's what their balances are.
Thank you. I get
Chances
it
that
now.
all the accounts go negative are, it just won't happen.
Oh, no, I'm not worried about that.
Well, you would worry
that's why
about it
we're-
because then there'll be nobody, there'll be, you know what I
Right.
mean? In other words, there'll be no funds and
Yeah.
to give out.
But it addresses my concern on the
Correct.
two areas.
Right. Making
Thank
sure
you.
that groups that need the money
Up
in the
front.
front, that
They
there's,
have it.
that there's something there.
Thank you.
Understood.
So with what you said, in reading policy 4304, there will be some additional changes because you've changed part of the process to make it a little bit more accountable and for everyone, for the four sets of eyes, because that isn't in here.
Then it should be in your policy.
Right.
I mean, this is all coming on the heels of the audit that said you should be doing this on a monthly basis. So we ought to,
Right,
adapt that.
I don't
particular-
remember if we added
Yeah, we
that
added
piece in that thing, but it's, we added some of that language in the other policies, but not this one, yes. But we want to make sure that we're consistent with what it is we're doing.
Well, that's why we talked about not bringing those to the forefront
Well,
really
that's because-
quick until
right.
we get everything all tied together, and then we just do them all at once, otherwise we're gonna be redoing them over and over.
Other questions, comments?
Well, I was going to ask a question or make a couple of comments relative to a question that was asked earlier under public comments, and that is, when we went to town meeting and we asked for the money, what was that money to go towards? Because the auditor had made recommendations to us in working with, remember that we had so much money that was supposed to be for special education as the cushion, and then was money for our utilities. But I didn't think there was money for anything else, including positions.
Right. What we discussed was that the number that we brought to town meeting, that we requested from town meeting, did not include encumbrances for the 3 administrator positions for this year. So while it is correct to say that the money has come, if the question is, why has the money come but the positions have not? The answer is that the money that was requested did not include restoration of those positions for this school year. And that the request would have had to been increased by approximately $130,000.
It wasn't just that, there were additional positions that weren't filled and some other things that were cut as well.
Right, so there were
$400,000.
There were a number of
$37,000.
cuts, some active, some through attrition, that were built into the budget that was used to generate the number that that the schools requested from town meeting. So Evelyn's correct to say that we didn't request the money for those positions for this year. I think there was a further question about restoration of those positions and what a timeline for that would look like. And I think we've heard hints of it, but I'd just like to be explicit about it, that when we're talking about that, we're talking about not the FY15 budget, but the FY16 budget. And again, the timeline on the FY16 budget is that we'll have a draft budget or a preliminary budget for public release on January 27th.
Yes.
And and the administration is currently engaged in building that budget. And the budget that comes out on January 27th is going to be a needs-based budget that will reflect what the administration believes is necessary for the following school year. And at that point, we will have public input to critique the preliminary budget. We need to present a preliminary budget on January 27th so that the town manager can put his budget together, which is due on January 28th. We're not giving him a lot of time, but we understand that that's not the last budget. That may be a very big budget. It perhaps a miracle will occur and there'll be extra money around, but we know that that's not going to be the final budget. We're going to take public input on what we're recommending, and I'm sure there will be a lot of it. And some of it will be about, are the positions that are listed in that budget necessary? Are there positions that are not listed in the budget that are necessary? Are there services that are being shortchanged or overfunded? And we're looking forward to having that public discussion. Other thoughts or extensions?
No, I think, I have other things when we get to substitutes,
Okay.
whenever.
Anything else on questions that we've heard earlier tonight?
No, but I think we tried to be clear on those particular issues.
I think we have a responsibility to be clear on those particular issues. Okay, if there are no further questions about the timeline, then yes, let's move along to the substitutes.
Sure. As part of the FY15 financial update, folks, we've been talking about substitutes in terms of that line item from year to year. And Ken Stelazzi, I'm going to invite him up. He is our Human Resource Director, and he's been working with Kelly Services. Kelly Services is a company that we've worked with to provide us with substitutes for at least the last decade. And Ken's going to give you a big picture in terms of substitutes. We've talked a lot about different lines, different line items and so forth, but also, too, some of the information that we use in terms of, long-term subs, short-term sub. General presentation designed to be brief, but also, too, may foster some specific questions for you folks for us to come back, if that makes sense. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken. You have a copy of the PowerPoint in your packet. He has it on the screen as well.
Thank you. So, just briefly, this presentation is mostly focused on FY14. So that's the 2013-14 school year. Up on the screen, these are the total costs for the substitute teaching for last year. That's $726,846,000, along with the additional $45,766 that were paid in this fiscal year. But I thought it was important to include that so that you could get an idea of what really the total number for FY14 was. So that's the $772,612. Just some other information. These are the rates that the district pays Kelly Services per day for their substitute teacher services. So a short-term substitute teacher is $99.40 per day. A long-term substitute teacher, which is generally more than 10 consecutive days in the same assignment, we pay $172.50 per day. And then for all of our short-term substitute needs for support staff, we pay $14.20 per hour. So I thought that was helpful information for you all to have, so that you can make some sense of how we get to the total number. Over the past year, since last fall, we've been looking closely at substitute teaching services and expenses in an effort to streamline them. We know that the costs have been significant, and we've put several measures into place, and we continue to look at the whole process. Last year, one of the things we did was we removed the automatic assignment of a substitute when a paraprofessional submits an absence, so that if a paraprofessional was absent on any particular day, the school, in communication with the central office, would determine if a substitute was needed, and if one was needed, it would be requested. My department started looking closely at the Kelly Services invoices weekly prior to them going to accounts payable, so that we could look for anomalies and trends and just things that stood out to us, so we could investigate further to get a better handle on the expenses. We created a process for securing a long-term substitute, so that all the information was coming into our office. We could inform technology so that the person could be set up with the appropriate accounts. We could be in touch with Kelly Services to make sure that the person contacted them as soon as possible to get registered and to try to, again, just streamline the process and make it a little more efficient and effective. We've also been working closely with the principals. Over several meetings, we've looked at contract language just to get everyone familiar with, with the appropriate uses of sick days, personal days, again, in an effort to just educate everyone on the types of absences that exist. So we've done that. This year, we're currently doing a lot of things. We're reviewing monthly usage reports that we generate from Kelly Services, and there'll be a slide. The next slide, we'll take a look at that and give you an example. We're closely monitoring the use of vacancies. You'll see on all these future slides, we have two types of ways that a substitute can be secured. One is an absence, where a substitute is called in to fill in for a particular employee, and the other is what's called a vacancy, which generally is used when we have a position that isn't filled, or we have at each school, for example, 1 day a week, we have one substitute teacher who's called in to work through a vacancy, and they provide support to teachers for their special education meetings. So you'll see in all these slides, we refer to absences and vacancies together, but they're billed the same way, and for all intents and purposes, they're handled the same way. We're closely reviewing the types of vacancies and absences that are available through the Kelly Services system. You'll see in future slides that we have a couple of duplicate types, and again, looking to streamline the system any way we can to be more efficient. We're also looking to centralize some of the processes around substitute teachers. So, for example, approvals for certain types of absences will, in the future, once we put this into place, will come to the central office, and between my office and the special education office, we will be working together to approve certain absences and then communicating that back to the school. The last bullet here, currently when an employee goes online and they request an absence, they have the ability to select short-term or long-term. It's just the way the system has been set up. And while the default is short-term, because that's generally the type of absences we have, employees on occasion will accidentally select long-term, and that actually is tied to the billing rate. So what we've discovered is that, if we remove that access, which really doesn't need to be there, we'll have more accurate billing, and we're looking forward to that going into effect. So this is an example of one type of report that is available for us here at central office, and also at the school level for the principal and the secretary. This is called a day of the week absence report. And this particular report was run from September 2014 through November, and it shows by day all the different types of absences by color. It's totaled at the bottom, and again, this is just one way that we can look at the data and try to analyze it for trends and patterns, and just have more information. Sorry about the size, but it was hard to get a print screen that would fit on the PowerPoint. But that's just one example of reports that are available to us. This is a chart showing all of the absences and vacancies for the 2013-14 school year collectively for the district. And just so you know, the types of employees that use Kelly Services are any members of the teachers unit, and that includes guidance counselors, psychologists, as well as the substitute support staff, the support staff unit employees, which are the aides, the paraprofessionals, the secretaries, and the clerks. And those are the employees that utilize this system. So you'll see the most common day used is personal illness. So at the bottom, you'll see the total. I was afraid I was going to do that. Sorry. total absences and vacancies for the school year last year, 10,540. Of those, 7,829 were filled by substitutes. So the other 2,700 or so absences were for employees that didn't require substitutes, guidance counselors, secretaries, what have you. And you'll see the second one from the top, vacancy position, that, again, that's that category of absence that's not tied to any employee. And you can see that that's a significant number overall, and that's why, again, we're looking closely at that going forward.
So it's not actually a position, it's not actually positions that there are, could be, but.
It could be. That was the original intent of that classification, was for vacant positions.
Someone
but it's
leaves
been
and you
used-
haven't filled it in time yet.
Yep, but it's been used for several different things, and there are several vacancy types that currently exist in the system.
Do you know how long they've done that?
I don't. I'm guessing it's probably been the whole time that we've used Kelly Services.
2,000 man-days for FY 13-14. It's 2,000 man-days, 1,978.
Right here, so I have other questions on those, but I'll let him go through it.
So the remainder of the slides are just the same information, but broken down by school. And you'll see the usage is the same in terms of the types of days that are used more often than others. And I'll just go through each one, but you have it in your handout. It's essentially the same format for each school. And that's the end of my presentation. Look forward to questions.
Okay. On the vacancies, I mean, you have like, say, 2,000 days, that's more than having, say, one person per building per se.
Mhm.
But have we investigated whether or not if we had some part-time people, that it would save us money by having them float within the building during a day?
We have looked at that. We've looked at calling them, for example, permanent subs assigned to each building. And
Not through Kelly, but through
Okay.
us. Because then we can set the rate, or they can fall underneath a contract, or we can do what we want. With Kelly, you're locked into what this
then you
number
got-
is. But if we have people that are under the 20 hours at a certain rate, and it would have made, there's a lot of dominoes that will fall if we ever did it, but I'm just questioning whether or not that's something that could save us money on this line item.
all I can say, we haven't looked at that specifically until now.
But you
I
have,
think
but you
part of
have
our
looked at
contract.
doing it through Kelly?
We've looked at, for instance, looking at one school and trying to get an average absences per day, taking out long-term sub vacancies, and we've determined that it's not a significant number per day that we would need to fill with a person. So to take, to hire 2 or 3 permanent subs at one school, it would not be cost-effective to do that.
And plus, think about it. I mean, you're not gonna get a replacement, same type of position that someone that's a PSP versus a math teacher, or versus a specific studies teacher.
Well, I don't know that they're actually out there looking for specifics when they fill those positions, are they? Does
Yeah,
Kelly say if the math
They don't
person
bring
calls
in-
in?
they don't bring in a-
because if they're online, do they say what it is that they want to have a teacher replaced? They just say they need a sub.
But
that
there
correct?
is a different type of person,
But I
right?
think, just to come back to Evelyn's original question, was to have somebody outside of our contract with Kelly Services. And that is our contract with them, that our substitutes that we have. I mean, we can hire somebody on a part-time basis, but then they become our employee, and we put them on the payroll.
Right, well, that's what I'm asking, is if there's any cost savings with regard to doing something like that. Not that you're going to diminish, obviously, by how much money it costs us, what it is that we're going to be paying them, but it may, because some of this, in terms of how you use that vacancy position, to me is relatively new. But I've been around a long time. So, things have expanded on that line item, and that's why that line item is high, is because you've added to that line item. And it's very difficult as you add more things to that line item to have more control over it because you have more variables.
Well, it's one of the things that we have added I think in probably the last few years, and I'll give you an example, because we use Kelly Services if we need a substitute at the paraprofessional level. So say, for example, and we've talked about special education costs, and Brad will be giving his presentation next, but if we have it as part of an intervention for a student, to determine whether that student may require the services of a paraprofessional in the classroom, rather than, you need to see if that intervention works. And so what we do is we would bring somebody in on a trial basis for a week or 2 weeks, collect data, and then bring that back to the team. Sometimes it's 3 weeks. And then we bring that information back to the team. So rather than go out in the past and hire somebody full-time and then we have them on the rolls, we would use a vacancy sub in that position. So you may see in those numbers 3 people who are here for 2.5 weeks at a time or 3 weeks at a time in a vacancy piece, looking at discrete trials for students in that particular case. So I think that's new, at least in my time that's been here.
Right, but also when you just talk about if any PSP doesn't show up, your first bullet point under FY14 is that you've removed the automatic assignment of a sub when a paraprofessional submits an absence. So that may be the difference in the number of absences versus the number of subs that we've had in terms of that 2,700 numbers, that they're just not being filled.
But it also goes a lot to our professional staff as well.
Now, the other question I had when you were talking about that, you said that they have now disabled whether or not they want a long-term or short-term sub?
That's what we're looking to do. We haven't implemented it yet.
Okay. If perchance they hit the wrong button, do they get automatically paid the higher number? And then how is that figured out, how you try to get that difference in money back? Because you have a long-term sub rate and a short-term, so there's a definite difference in about $73 or
Right.
so.
That's what this has been a fairly recent discovery, that this billing issue as being tied to the short-term, long-term selection of the employees. So I don't have an answer yet. We're looking into it as we speak. It's something that came up when we started looking closely at additional things we could do to tighten up the system, was in looking at the billing more closely and in talking with our contacts at Kelly Services. When I asked a lot of questions about, what does it look like when the employee enters the absence and what do they see, this came up. And that light bulb kind of went off, because we've had some billing discrepancies and haven't been able to determine how something changes, or shows up differently on the bill than we thought it should. So we're working on trying to correct those now.
Was that anything that the auditor looked at?
I don't believe so.
Not to my knowledge. And it's not something, again, we're still looking into it in terms of Ken seeing it through the first time, seeing it through a teacher. Most people who are sick tomorrow morning, they wake up, they don't feel well, they know it's a short-term piece. It's not something that we think has been overused, but we're looking at controls and trying to bring that back into a centralized process.
Just to add to what Evelyn just said, is it tied to an individual? So in other words, you do know who the individual that's asking for the substitute.
Yes.
So the system should automatically know back through payroll if this is a full-time or a part-time person. So it shouldn't give an option to be, in other words, if, I forget the new title, but PSPs, for example, who are part-time employees in probably 99% of the times, they shouldn't have an option to be able to select a long-term replacement, right? Because
Right.
they already know that's the kind of position. So once that person knows once the system knows who that person that just logged in to try to get that substitute, the option shouldn't be there for a long-term substitute or even a short-term substitute. I mean, it really is just an absence.
From what I understand, this wasn't always set up this way.
Okay.
It was set up this way at some point to allow the billing to look differently. So right now, we're getting 2 bills from Kelly Services weekly. One is for short-term absences, one is for long-term absences. The idea originally was to be able to just monitor that more closely. It's not working out that way because it's not accurate. So by removing that option, it should, again, not that this has been a huge cost issue, I don't think, but it's just an example of how a billing error can occur for something that is easily corrected.
And just a clarification, Nick, all of our employees don't have the option of a long-term sub in terms of, there are ways in which we
And
do that.
options for them to pick.
Right, it's more of any long-term sub requirements go through our HR office in terms of whether it's medical leave,
can't
what's
pick it.
maternity leave, and what we've done too in terms of the hiring of long-term subs, and we've done this for years in terms of our professional staff, is we hire licensed teachers, to come in and, gone through the whole hiring process, and to centralize that long-term piece, and through people coming from maternity leaves, they work through HR. It's just going into, previously, either the staff member or the secretary would click off every day the person's absence. Now, that's going to be done through our central office. We know who's out for the next 3 weeks in terms of a long-term sub position.
How much money are we saving using Kelly Services as opposed to what we used to do and had the sub, we arranged the subs in-house?
I have no idea, because we've been doing Kelly for so long.
And before Kelly, we had Opus in terms of that back in 2000. I know a lot of districts are looking at this in terms of employee benefits, in terms of management of the system and so forth, that a lot of districts who aren't using services like this are looking at it, just in terms of cost savings.
Some of the things that immediately you think about are the cost to have a sub-coordinator, in a district, so that's one reason why people might look to Kelly. And then just the training, and some of the insurance, the insurance that Kelly Services covers for all of the employees. There's a lot of things that go into it. But beyond that, I don't have that information.
Well, we could ballpark it, right? If we know, it's what, 10,000 hours or something total?
Yeah, but what kind of
For-
10,000 hours?
For the year?
How much of it? It has to
Well,
be
if
10,000.
we
The
did
days.
that, if we did that in.
The days.
If we did that in-house, yeah, you can convert that to FTEs and.
Yeah, but if 8,000 of that is the $14.99 an hour, it's totally different than if it's, the higher rate.
72.
Right, you need to know which category breakdown, because then you'll know what the dollar value is. You can't just say hours. Hours is not a good.
Well, again, I think that information is in here, right?
No,
I
but you
mean,
have to take the
maternity
10
leave is long-term.
Right, but you have to take,
Is
what
there
I'm saying is.
are there other long-term categories?
There are some personal illness leaves end up being
Right,
long-term.
what you-
A
what you
long-term
need to-
aide versus a long-term
Right,
teacher.
Right.
You need to take the 10,000 hours and break it out into a dollar value, not go by hours. Hours is not a good.
Right, because this is what we're being charged, but that's not what the people are being paid.
Right.
Right.
Because we
You
have a
don't know
fee.
that.
So now the question is, what is the difference? And whether or not that difference would pay for us to do our own piece. The reason that they stopped doing it was
Well,
because
I mean-
there was only one person doing it. And that was when we had a much smaller, at that point, it was a smaller system.
That was a while ago.
Well, yeah, I know, it was like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Plus.
But also, to the piece in terms of providing somebody who would
Yeah, I was gonna say, we've dropped in enrollment.
who would screen all these folks, who would hire all these folks, who would interview all these folks, who would maintain, the database and so forth. I mean, just, to get it up and running.
It's just a huge task. It's
You
not
can do the
just-
analysis, but I think the
and the
reason that we did
training.
it was because it was just too much work for our system.
Well, I mean, if it's 100, we're paying the short-term subs $100 a day, and there's, 200 working days in a year?
There's no training.
That's only 20,000 a year. I think we'd be hard pressed to meet that, probably.
I don't know, until we start taking a look at it more closely and working it out.
No, I'm not saying that we shouldn't work it out, but just back of the
You could
envelope
end up
kind of
developing a
stuff.
whole department just to take care of this. You'd probably have to add 3 or 4 people just to his department alone, just to put this together and then maintain it, interviewing people.
Or you
hiring.
guys could dig down into it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. We'll do that.
Oh, the other ones we do.
Free
I mean,
time.
Well, we're providing you folks the overview.
Right,
And
right.
we're taking questions, suggestions. I mean, this is,
Right, this is the discussion. Can you put the slide up that you can't see? So I can see it,
Oh, sure.
please? Because that was one of the questions we asked, which we haven't really gone into the detail of it. So what we had asked was, how many absences are there on the different categories on a day-to-day basis, to see if there was any kind of an abuse for Mondays and Fridays? And so it,
It's the
not
personal day
blatant.
category.
Well, in terms of personal illness, it's not blatant. In terms of personal
No,
days,
personal
it's Fridays.
days.
It kind of
Mondays and
jumps at you.
Fridays.
Because I know when I taught school, you couldn't take a Monday or a Friday off unless you had, like a doctor's note, or you had something really very specific about that. So anyway, I just wanted to, point out that we did ask that question, and that since we
did,
couldn't
and
see it.
and here's the answer, and I think if that's something that we as a committee decide that we want to pursue, then we should engage.
discuss
Then we should engage in that through the collective bargaining process. I mean, we have a contract with the teachers that gives them a number of personal days. If we feel like they're taking too many, then there's a remedy for that, and it involves negotiating with them the next time the contract comes up. Until then, I think it's going to be difficult to just say, don't use them.
Well, no,
I mean,
you
we've
can't.
agreed to
That's
give
correct. I'm
those
not-
days to
I'm
them.
not saying that. I'm just saying that we asked for the information, we have the
Right.
information. And sometimes when we've done collective bargaining, they also ask for this information when it comes up, because it becomes part of that discussion. So at least we can get the information, because before we didn't get the information to be able to see that. And so you can always you can get rid, in terms of personal illness, personal days, you get rid of the Monday and the Fridays to see if there's any strangeness going on in the middle of the week, and it isn't much different.
There's not-
It's just
there's
the
not a lot of
Thursday is a
difference.
higher number also. So, but the differences, for me, aren't that great.
Right.
For it to say to me, oh, we have an abuse issue somewhere along the line by our staff taking Mondays and Fridays off, or certain numbers of people that would do that. So I don't see it. Just so that we put it out there, because we have had
Yeah, I
the
think that's- I
discussion
think it's fair.
on that. How big is this slide when you don't have it up on the screen? I mean, is it
It's a web page, so it's just a web page that was too long to really fit on one PowerPoint slide. And the report can be run at the top. You'll see the data points there, start date and end date. These reports can be run for up to 90 days, which is why I didn't include like all of last year as an example. So you could request a special report through Kelly Services. It takes a little while to get.
Do we have to pay for it?
No.
So this is, I'm sorry, so
Yep.
this is hours, correct? Is that hours?
Days.
That's days.
That's days.
But this goes from 9/1/2014 to 11/30/2014.
Yeah, basically you've got.
3 months.
3 months.
Yep.
That's a lot of days in 3 months.
2000.
And you can also drill down. I mean, you can look at particular schools, particular absence types, so. there's a
Right,
lot
but
of-
it's
yeah.
hard to see on that slide, so
No,
if you
I
just
know.
kind of can forward me something larger that I can look at, I would appreciate it, please.
Well, this presentation will be up on the website, right?
Yep.
Right, but if
So
it's
you'll be
that
able
size, I
to-
can't see
Well, I
it.
think you'll probably be able to expand.
Need a
little bit.
magnifying glass.
Magnifying glass over.
2 sets of glasses on instead of 1.
I got one of those glasses that has the 2 lenses on it.
Okay, well,
Right.
thank you for putting this together, because it did bring us information that we've been asking for.
Welcome.
Are there other questions, comments? I just have one. When you say removed automatic assignment of a substitute when a paraprofessional submits an absence, who is reviewing that?
So those requests are coming to the central office.
Now. Were they previously?
Sometimes. It's been a combination of different people looking at those absences.
Okay.
It's, when we removed that automatic assignment, it just depends on the situation. If it's an absence in advance, we have, something scheduled for next week, we have more notice, we can talk about it, review it in more detail. If it's a call that morning, call in sick, it just depends on who's available to review it at that particular time. But we've been reviewing them all as closely as we can after we made the change.
Your use of the term paraprofessional, is that in line with the new definition?
Yes. Yeah, formerly IPSB.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Ken, thanks very much.
Thank you.
I agree with Evelyn. It's nice to get this
Yeah.
information. We've been looking for it for some time, and now we have it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay. Next up, we have a report on our special education program. Mr. Brad Brooks is here.
Okay.
Tiano.
Folks, this is, Brad Brooks, Director of Student Services, as part of our annual presentation, kind of the state of the state with our special education department. Brad is in charge of a lot of different departments, that he'll speak to. And we've talked a lot around this table in the last few months in terms of special education regarding costs. One of the, similar to what we just discussed with the substitutes, is, this is an overall picture from Brad. Specific questions or specific presentations, because I know Evelyn had brought up the point about bringing back Brad maybe for a couple of smaller presentations, more specific. That's a possibility as well. He's amenable to doing that. So this is along the lines of what you've seen in the past. And Mike, I know when you and I put together the agenda, some of this information is new. It's taken us a little bit longer to go through, but I think this is well timed.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Tiano. So, as Dr. Tiano mentioned, this presentation is meant very similar to presentations in previous years, just to give an overview of the special education department and the student services department as a whole, looking at from the district. And again, I'm very happy to come back in the spring, into future meetings and talk about, drill down a little bit more and talk about some specific information if folks would like me to do that as well. So. Just talking about the Student Services Department. So Student Services and Special Education really do go hand in hand. The Student Services Department, Special Education falls under the purview of the Student Services Department. And just to clarify, there's been some questions, over the months, over the years. Student Services oversees and coordinates the services that we provide to students who require specialized instruction and or support. This includes special education, this includes specially designed instruction, this includes our guidance departments, our nursing departments, our psychological services that we provide to services. This includes all specialized transportation, students who receive related services, occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, students who may need an interpreter, students who have issues with mobility, etc., and also students who are on 504 plans. What is the philosophy of our special education department in Chelmsford? We do a phenomenal job at educating our students, and our philosophy is, as much as we can, to keep Chelmsford students in Chelmsford. And we do this by responding to a changing population of students, assisting students with access in the general curriculum, being aware, and I spoke in previous presentations, being very aware of some of the changing needs of our students. We're seeing more and more students with social emotional issues in our schools. We're seeing more and more students on the autism spectrum. That's not just Chelmsford-wide, that's that's statewide, that's nationwide. We're seeing an increase in students with increased emotional behavioral supports, students who might have some acting out behaviors at a younger grade, working very closely with our CHIPS preschool program, with our elementary school principals and team chair people to address assisting those students. Students who receive specialized instruction, and we do a very nice job at being very creative, to problem solve very unique situations that come to us. Some of the new programs we've developed. We developed the Student Transitional Educational Program at Chelmsford High School. We have a partner classroom called the New England Center for Children Partner Classroom over at the Parker. We've expanded our co-teaching opportunities in each of the last 4 years at all of our schools, and we've expanded programs for students with language-based learning disabilities as well. Looking at our district as a whole, the numbers of students with disabilities has not gone up or down. It's stayed the same. It's slightly trended up, but we are still significantly over a percentage point below the state average. Right now, we have, as of last week, we had 848 students with disabilities in the district who are on IEPs. Of those 848 students, 760 of those are educated within district, and we have 88 students out of district. There's an asterisk next to that 88 because we have a couple of students who are cost shared with other communities, one from Methuen and one from Lowell, that we were made aware of this past year. And so we are in a 50% cost share with those communities. And that is one parent lives in our town, one parent lives in another town. Parents have joint physical custody of these children. and therefore we pay for 50% of their tuition.
Joint custody, huh?
This is a breakdown of the different disability categories that we see. And I always say this with a little bit of a misnomer, because several of our students have more than one disability. And these numbers haven't changed significantly either. The two numbers that have trended up a tiny little bit, and again, I mentioned that previously, are students on the autism spectrum and students with emotional impairment. Some of the updates of our special education department. Last week, Tuesday, we had a Special Education Parent Advisory Council meeting with our CPAC president, and we had a parent informational night, which was very well attended. We had 27 parents come from all of our grade levels. We are in discussions, and we're currently doing a Survey Monkey with all of our special education parents, and we're going to do some workshops this spring on nutrition, on developing guardianships and trusts for students with disabilities, on educating parents on their transition into adult services for their children with disabilities. Additionally, in the spring, actually not in the spring, in March, almost the spring, we're hosting a 2-day training over at the McCarthy, just looking at our continuum of mental health services for students with social emotional disabilities. We're doing this with 3 area communities, with Billerica, with Groton, and with Tewksbury. And we've also been spotlighted, and I know several of you have seen the fantastic shows that we've spotlighted our special education department in many of our programs. On Inside CPS, we had some of our staff from the BIAM talk about our PDD programs. We had students from the PAVE program at Chelmsford High School. We had students from our McCarthy Life Skills program, and also in our CHIPS program, and some of our elementary students talking about some of the curriculum that the guidance counselors do with our speech therapists in the elementary schools. To come in the spring, and I hope people are going to be watching in the spring, we're going to be spotlighting some more of our programs, including some of our programs at the high school, our SAP programs, our elementary learning centers, and we're also very excited that we're partnering with the technology department at Parker. We have a 3D printer there, and we have a student who has a visual impairment, and some of our students are going to be assisting that student with the visual impairment to do a schedule board for him. So very, very exciting stuff that we're doing, and it's going to be spotlighted on Inside CPS. What makes us so effective? What are some strategies that we use to maintain an excellent special education department? I've said this from the day that I came on board. I've been incredibly impressed with the level of training, level of competency, and all of our staff across the board, from our teachers to our paraprofessionals to our psychologists to our related service providers. We are able to do in-house, and I think we lose sight of this, how thorough and how comprehensive of a job that we can do with evaluations for students. But we are able to do in-house psychological and neuropsychological evaluations, occupational, physical, speech and language pathology evaluations, educational learning style evaluations. This is something we've done a lot more of in the past couple of years, but functional behavior assessments by our board-certified behavior analysts. We do home assessments, and we also do augmentative and alternative communication evaluations. We stay on top of updates on essential assessments. This next year, the WISC, the Wessler Intelligence Scale for Children, and the WACE, the Adult Intelligence Scale, is going to be updated, and there's a 5th edition. All 10 of our school psychologists are going to a training this spring on the new version of that. The Woodcock-Johnson is updated, and as of July 1st, there'll be a new version of that. We are doing trainings for our teachers. The SELF is an evaluation for our speech and language pathologists. So we are in the process of sending our essential persons to all of those updates so that we will be trained on the new evaluation tools. And in doing so and having this ability, we cut down on independent evaluation requests at the district expense. We are able to do all these evaluations. We do not need to send students out to have these evaluations completed.
How many evaluations a year do you do?
I could break it down into individual, but how many
total?
How many total evaluations do we do? Well, as a rule of thumb, we do 1 out of every 3 students on an IP will be up for a 3-year reevaluation. So, so that's around 300. And then on top of that, we probably do about 250 additional initial evaluations, so about 550 or 600 a year.
So 550 evaluations you do, and if you didn't have these staff to do this, you'd have to send them out at a cost of probably...
Correct. And for some of the more specific evaluations, like for example, we have a neuropsychologist at Dr. Susan O'Brien at Parker. Many districts don't have a neuropsychologist on staff who can do these neuropsychological evaluations. John O'Sullivan does augmentative communication evaluations for us. Home assessments and functional behavior assessments are things that many districts are not able to do. We can do those in-house.
Since we have a break, that's a major change, I believe.
It is.
Because when I was principal, we had to change hiring practices in order to have more people who could do the testing because we just couldn't cover it. So
Couldn't have people.
that's a significant improvement.
Well, that's why I asked the question, where you have roughly 550 at a potential cost savings of $2,500 each.
But that's not the only savings.
No,
When
but-
you brought,
no,
when
no,
you
but-
brought in a lot of the programs in-house, especially the autistic program, that's where it's a very significant amount by, instead of sending them out of district, because even the transportation costs, it's a lot less, even though we have to transport them in district.
But transporting them in district, in town, or across town is much different than transporting them
Out of
5
town.
towns over.
Right,
Correct.
because I know where a lot of those facilities are, even on the South Shore. And at one point, we had one student that was in a van for like an hour and a half just to get to the South Shore, because that's where the specialized program was.
Yeah, there
Do
are
we still
programs.
have students that are on those buses for long periods of time?
We try to avoid that as much as we can, but there are programs that are 25, 30 miles away that are very specialized, and that's the closest program for that child. But we do try to avoid that at all, if we can, and that's one of the team considerations when they're looking at placement for children. Some of the other strategies that we use, well-trained chairpersons who we continually we attend legal updates and work on mediation, conflict resolution with teams, team building. I mentioned earlier we have an incredibly gifted group of teachers, paraprofessionals, therapists. We had a paraprofessional training this past Friday on executive functioning for students with disabilities. With the new paraprofessional contract, the paraprofessionals are going to actually receive 7 professional development half-days this year, and that's a change from past years when they received 4. So that was a nice new thing that we were able to provide for the paraprofessionals, and it's been very well received. We give them a variety of different professional development opportunities, and we also, at the end of every year, we ask for their input on what they would like to receive training on. So, homeschool facilitators, and then we are also, as Evelyn mentioned a few minutes ago, our students that are placed out of district, are there programs that we could create, or are there supports that we could provide in district to bring students who are now out of district back into the district, so they are with their siblings, with their peers. They have a much shorter commute. It's parents, much more accessible for their parents should they need to be picked up for being ill or whatever. So we're constantly reviewing that as well. I mentioned one of our goals as a special education department for our teachers, our therapists, our team chair people, is for parents, and we mentioned this at the CPAC meeting last week, is for parents to walk away from team meetings very, very clear on what their options are, very, very clear on what the next steps are. We do not want parents or guardians feeling confused or wanting extra input. And I think we do a very nice job in that, and we're continually working on making sure that parents are feeling comfortable and very, very aware of what their options are. Some of the supports that we provide in district for students who have a little bit more involved needs, we have one-on-ones for students with intensive behaviors or medical needs. I mentioned earlier, Al mentioned that's something newer for the district, but we have board-certified behavior analysts. We have 1 full-time contracted board-certified behavior analyst, and we have a .5 person as well. And those board-certified behavior analysts also oversee our ABA paraprofessionals, and I believe the number is in the mid-20s. I can get the exact number of the number of paraprofessionals that we have that have received ABA training and are working directly with children who require that level of support. Additionally, we also have a handful of ancillary staff that we hire through contracted services. These are for students who have low incidence disabilities, vision specialists, sign language interpreters, students who have issues with mobility, so there are mobility specialists, students who may have may have significant hearing loss or may have a cochlear implant, so we have audiologists that we contract with as well. Kind of segueing into contracted services, I know that a few people have asked me, what does contracted services entail? And the district has utilized contracted services for a number of years to provide supports. This is, that I mentioned earlier, the specialized instruction for, if we do not have an audiologist on staff, we would need to contract with one to provide services for a student. So that's specialized instruction. Students who require specialized ABA professionals in order to access programming in the district. The New England Center program at Parker falls under contracted services. Any students who receive home services or parent training. We have about 30 students in our district who receive, someone actually goes into the home, works directly with the parents. Parents are part of the process to learn how to work with their child who might be having some challenging behaviors, some toileting issues, things of that nature at home. The district BCBA that I spoke about earlier. Our part-time clinical psychologists at CHIPS, and any contracted physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech and language pathologist that we bring in on a short-term basis to cover for maybe a medical leave or maternity leave, or if we have significant growth within the school year and we need to provide services for students, we generally will contract that out. And then we also have a couple of students in our district who receive a home program. And what a home program is that these students receive their program. It does not occur in a traditional public school setting or a private school setting, so it's a specialized program to meet that student's very unique needs. What are some of the unforeseen costs and staff considerations in special education? I spoke about this last year as well. We may have a student whose needs change mid-year. Student may be in crisis. Student may be going through a very difficult period. We need to increase the level of support for that student. That wasn't foreseen at the beginning of the school year. It's now December. It's now January. I had a meeting at McCarthy today for something similar to that nature, and looking at what supports can we provide for that student. Students who require specialized transportation. Division of Child and Families, DCF placements. If the Division of Child and Families determines that a child needs to be placed residentially because of significant safety concerns in the home and pulled from the home, and that residential placement also has a day component, the district then must pick up the cost for the day portion of that placement. That happened to two of our children last year who were pulled from the home by DCF because of very significant concerns that DCF had, and the district the district picked up the day portion of that student's placement. I mentioned earlier cost shares. Presently, we have 2 cost shares with other communities. Again, these are unforeseen that come up, especially when parents are in separated or divorce situations. Student hospitalizations. I mentioned, Nick, earlier, requests for initial evaluations. The district sometimes, especially in the spring, we get inundated with requests for initial evaluations when students are struggling and parents are looking to have their child evaluated. And so that's a big staff consideration for us. And then, we had talked about earlier, new students moving into the district and students who age into services. And by aging in, at the beginning of the school year, we do our best at the CHIPS preschool program to guesstimate how many students may enter the program between September and June, but we don't know. Generally, we find out between 3 and 5 months prior to a student turning 3 and aging into the program. We don't know what that student's level of needs are, and so. And generally, as the CHIPS program starts the year, it generally trends up throughout the year, and then as kids get to kindergarten age, they move out. That's a very, very hard thing. That's a very hard thing to guesstimate. Our special education programming within the district. I mentioned our CHIPS preschool program. Presently, we have 11 half-day programs and 2 full-day programs for students excuse me, with intensive special needs. The nice thing is we've trended up a tiny little bit. Our general education students has also trended up, which is nice. We refer to those as Gen Pops, or general population students. And so presently we have 144 students in our CHIPS preschool program. I mentioned the early intervention programs, the Ann Sullivan Center, and programs of that nature are the programs that refer students to us when they're age 2, 6, 2, 7, 2, 8, and then we become aware of their needs. We generally will do an evaluation and determine whether or not they're eligible for services, and then those students will begin with us generally on the day of their 3rd birthday. We're seeing more and more students in our CHIPS preschool program on the autism spectrum. We're also seeing a small handful of students who are coming to us with complex medical needs as well. And so those are things that, working with our preschool coordinator, we're looking at and making sure that we can provide services for those students. In our elementary programs, and I know this is somewhat redundant, Mike, and I'm glad to go into detail, or
It's okay.
But we have the Learning Center generally is for students with a mild to moderate disabilities who require some academic support, but generally they're included for a majority of their day. Typically, they're pulled out for one of their periods of day and receive additional support. Resource rooms are for students who need a little bit more support than the Learning Center would provide. These students are generally included for a majority of their day as well, but they may need some more support or some more modified or adapted curriculum as well. And then in our elementary programs, we also have what's called Early Childhood Centers, or ECCs. And these are for kindergarten, first grade students with more significant communication impairments, kids on the autism spectrum, or kids with developmental delays who receive additional specialized instruction. As far as specialized programs in our elementary programs, we have our autism program at the Byam. Presently, we have 3 teachers. We added a teacher this past year. That program is an outstanding program, and I would love if anybody would love to go and take a tour of that program to see some of the amazing things that they're doing with those students. That program is also spotlighted on Inside CPS as well. We also have a functional academics life skills program for students with intellectual impairment, students with Down syndrome, over at the Center Elementary School. I shouldn't just single out the Byam because all of our programs are outstanding, but these are some of the specialized programs that we have at our elementary schools. As far as the middle schools, very similar model to elementary school in that we have Learning Center, we also have Resource Room, and then we have what's called our Student Assistance Programs, referred to as our SAP programs. At McCarthy, it's the MAP program, McCarthy Assistance Program. These are for students who need a little bit additional emotional support. They may need some support with processing frustrating interactions, that they have executive functioning issues, difficulty with unstructured time. And so we have student assistance programs at both Parker and at McCarthy. As far as specialized programs, at the McCarthy, we have the Functional Academics Life Skills Program. That program is fed by our center school Functional Academics Program. And at the Parker, we have the program for students on the autism spectrum that's run by the New England Center for Children. As far as at Chelmsford High School, again, similar to the middle schools, Learning Center, Resource Room, Student Assistance Program. We have the PAVE program, which is an acronym for Providing Academic and Vocational Experiences for our students with intellectual impairment. And then we also have what's called our STEP program, and this is the program for both regular and special education program for students referred generally through the deans, the principal, or team chair people that may have either experienced significant trauma or had may have been a discipline issue, and this is a program that slowly reintegrates students back into the general education setting at the high school. Our Student Services Department, Kara Saranich oversees our CHIPS preschool program. Patty Doherty and Lisa Diaz each have 2 elementary schools and 1 middle school, and we set it up that way for a little continuity of programming, continuity of team chair people, because generally the Harrington and the Byam feed the Parker, and the Center and South Row that Lisa Diaz oversees feed the McCarthy. Marla Dela Cruz is at the high school. We have a new out-of-district coordinator this year, who was a teacher at McCarthy last year. Renee Morgan oversees all of our students out of district. And then we have 2 secretaries at the high school running our special education department, Terry Randolph and Katie Holy. And then Shirley Doré is over here at central office. So moving into next year, where are we at? What are we looking to do? Again, every year, but especially in the spring, evaluate all of our programs across the district for maximum effectiveness. Can we make some tweaks? Can we make some changes to possibly bring some students back into the district to support more students in our programs? We look at staffing programs in these patterns. Talked about this last year, talked about this the previous year, but looking at our programs as a whole for students with autism across the district, over reviewing our therapist caseload, and we're looking to expand co-teaching opportunities across the district as well, which is one of our district improvement plan initiative goals. Additionally, I mentioned earlier students students with significant social emotional issues, and these are students, you know, that we can identify as, you know, as at risk, or students that may be in crisis. You know, students with intensive social emotional impairments, students who may have experienced past trauma, students who may be court involved, students who may be on probation, and I mentioned Division of Child and Families, Division of Mental Health, DCF, DMH involved students. Now, these are kids that we're seeing in our middle school SAP programs. We're seeing in our STEP program at Chelmsford High School, and also in the SAP programs at Chelmsford High School. Circuit breaker. A lot of talk about circuit breaker, and I wanted just to explain briefly what is circuit breaker. So circuit breaker is a formula that was developed by the state to offset the costs of students whose programming costs the district significantly higher than average amount of money. And the way that it works is that the state of Massachusetts determines a foundation rate at which everything up to that foundation rate the district is responsible for paying for. So for example, in FY13 the foundation was $40,512. So if a student costs us $39,000 to educate him or her, then we would pay for every dollar of that amount. For every dollar past the foundation, every dollar past the $40,512, the state reimburses the district 70% of that. 72% of that last year. The reimbursement is then paid quarterly the following fiscal year. And so we submitted for circuit breaker reimbursement right around July 10th of this past year. And then the payments come quarterly. I'm sure Frank could explain very clearly, but the payments come quarterly based on our circuit breaker amount that was given to us. We generally don't know what the foundation amount or percentage of reimbursement is until the middle of May, or sometimes the end of May, depends on when the state likes to release that. Just for sake of historical perspective, that's the last 4 years foundation and then the reimbursement rate. There's talk of what's better, a higher foundation rate, a lower rate of reimbursement, or a lower foundation, higher rate of reimbursement. There's pros and cons to each. So
There's only so much money, so they're going to figure it out based upon how much money they have, not what's going to benefit districts.
It was back then.
Exactly.
Back then.
Yeah, they'll have a total and figure it out that way.
The special
It's not
education.
going to help us.
I know.
Sorry.
That's okay. The Student Service Department also has a handful of grants that it uses to offset the costs. The Special Education Allocation Grant is our big grant. Last year it was about $1.2 million. We used monies from that grant to pay for transportation, technology, contracted service providers. We also receive a much smaller early childhood grant that we use to pay for some of our early childhood consultants and paraprofessional and professional staff salaries. And then there's a staff development grant. This year, working with Dr. Hirsch's office, we use that staff development grant. Now, that money can only be used for staff training or staff development, and generally we like to do that in-house to get the most bang for our buck. I mentioned we're doing the training in March for our continuum of mental health supports for students, and then we're also doing mass tiered system of support, MTSS training with Dr. Hirsch's office, and we began that on Monday morning. So very exciting for the MTSS. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Fast and Furious coming.
A lot of information.
Questions? Comments?
Questions, I got to get to them. On the CPAC, we had a liaison to the Parent Advisory Council. Did you,
It's Barbara. However, I will say I was the liaison before she was, and the way it was explained to me, it's not a fundraising group. It's a support group for people who are facing challenges with their kids. They're not so much looking to sit around in meetings with a liaison. So I think our contact with them is a little limited, but
They know how to get in touch with them
Yeah.
if they feel they need it.
I found it most effective to wait for them to come to me.
is there still a requirement by the state that they have some kind of a contact or to come before the school committee to share with what their program is or what their activities are?
I don't know that, and I could look into that. I know that we are required to support them, and they are required to
Right.
exist. Whether or not that's a requirement, I can find out and get back to
Right,
you.
because for all the years that I was on it, then what occurred at that point was that fulfilled that requirement. So then I would come and give a report to the school committee to let them know what their activity, what they were doing, what they weren't doing, and all that other stuff, so that they didn't have to come before us on an annual basis to give a report of what their activity level was. So we need to find out whether or not that's still a requirement, because I haven't heard that it has been changed.
I believe the district is required to do one meeting a year, which it sounds like you just
Correct.
did. And again,
We gotta
I
check,
guess this is our.
because it's a little bit different than where I was at, because I was liaison for a lot of years.
I'll find
And
out
worked
about that.
with a lot of parents. On the one that, when you're saying that the staff is going to be trained on all the updates of essential assessments, do they get
Yes.
certifications on that? Are there special certifications there, or is it just that it just goes on in their file that they did it?
Well, it depends. It depends on the evaluation tool. For example, only a clinical psychologist can give the WAIS or the WISC. And so as one of the requirements, now that there's a new edition coming out, is that they need to receive training on administering the new test. Same thing with the for the speech and language pathologist. They cannot administer it unless they've received the training on it.
And when we went to the chairpersons, do you have how many students each of them are responsible for?
I do. I can give you that breakdown if you'd like.
Yep. Because usually, as you say, we get the most bang for our buck, and it's also in that area, too. I mean, when we talked about guidance and what that load was for the employees that we have as staff, it's the same pretty much that's here. I'm just curious to see if it's changed over the years, if it has gone up or down. You mentioned the New England Center for Children. Is that an outsource, or is that some kind of a different service? Instead of hiring our own people, we have some other agency that does this. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
I can. So the students that we have over at the Parker in the New England Center for Children in the partner classroom, we would not be able to keep those students likely, or a majority of them, in-house unless we had persons with their level of training to be able to run the program for them. So they have a very, very, they have their own curriculum that they provide for the students. They provide trainings, and they work very closely with Dr. Parks and Mr. Souza at Parker to include those students as much as they are able, but it's very, very likely that we would not be able to keep those students in-house unless we had persons with their level of training.
So it's like kind of outsourcing for that particular program, but it's still less than sending them out of district.
It's similar to having those students placed out of district, but within the Parker.
Okay, I'm fine, so far.
Other questions?
I have one quick question. Over in the CHIPS program, on one of the slides, you said there's 144 students, and 74 of the 144 are students with disabilities. Is that a high percentage, or is that?
We try to maintain, so a general integrated preschool program, you like to run with the 50-50 rule, or 51-49.
So it's not out of whack from a...
No, in fact, that number is more in line with where we want it to be, because last year, we were about 20 higher for students with disabilities than we were with students that did not. And so the beauty of having an integrated preschool is that you're integrating kids with disabilities without kids, and so there's social role models and opportunities for peer interactions So Kara Saranich has worked very hard with, with Sherry Dennis over at the Community Ed Center to really try to tout our early childhood programs and our preschool programs, and that number's, just to raise that number.
Okay. That's all I have. I have a couple of things. Yeah, first of all, the CHIPS number, looks like we're getting most of the kids in town, but maybe not all of them. There may still be a couple that are either unidentified or who are choosing not to come to CHIPS. If you look at the overall population.
For students with disabilities?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Would you say that's fair? I mean,
I think we do a very, very good job at identifying those kids and reaching out and doing lots of outreach to try to find out where those students are.
Yeah. No, just looking at the numbers, you're a little bit below 10% of the overall, and, you might expect to be around, just looking at the age ranges, and I assume that 760 is including up to 22 years.
Yes.
Old, right? So, yeah, so there might be another 10 kids maybe in town who aren't.
Some parents may choose to keep the children at home and not have them evaluated until they enter kindergarten or right before kindergarten. And so there may be children with disabilities that we're unaware of because the parents haven't had them evaluated.
I have a quibble about your presentation of the circuit breaker. And it's just about the definition of foundation. I would rather than say that the foundation is 40,000, I would say that's 4 times the foundation number, because that's a component of the formula, right? Just to make it, and it doesn't change the number, but just to make it more explicit. And this goes to the proposal by the guy from Concord, right? Who is talking about changing the multiplier from 4 times down to 3 times. Now that still has, as you two nadering nabobs pointed out, that doesn't increase the amount of money available.
Like a shish kebab?
Something like that.
I have a new title.
It's a Spiro Agnew.
That does help clarify.
A question about the early childhood grant for salaries. Was there some discussion that was maybe not the best use of grant monies on salaries?
Well, we had transitioned the use of grant mostly into transportation this past year.
That was for the allocation grant.
The allocation grant.
And would the same thing be true of the early childhood grant, or is it the sort of grant that you really have to spend on salaries?
I'm not sure. We would have to check into that.
The question is, can we stretch it a little bit farther if we're spending it slightly differently? I don't know.
Can I just, it all depends on the grant, if you're supplementing or supplanting. So if it's an additional, we wouldn't be able to do it out of the general fund, then you would have to write in the salaries. I don't know what the requirements are for that grant, but when you're looking at the grants, you have to see what they're specifically, their purpose is for. And if it's for supplementing, then you can't supplant.
Right, okay.
There are limitations on most of the grants.
Yeah,
You've got
there
to
is. They're pretty
very
specific.
clear. They're very specific.
I'm happy to see the breakdown on the population, the kind of the disability identifications. I'd still like to see some prior year numbers for that. Just to, I know you said that it's not changing much, but again, just so that we can build kind of trend lines. If we could get the last 3 or 4 years.
Looking at trend data in the different categories?
Yeah.
That actually would be helpful because, when we talk about expanding our programs for kids, for example, with autism, to see that we've grown from
I think
70 kids to 120 kids.
It's part of the conversation we're going to have as we go forward. And that brings me to the big thing, which is why are our costs up if our number of students isn't? I mean, we're seeing a from 744 to 760, it's only about a 2% increase. We've seen much larger increases than that. The other thing is that when we talk about the in-district versus out-of-district shift, based on these numbers, I'm not seeing a shift there either. It doesn't look like we're bringing a bunch of kids in district. So I guess I'm trying to understand where the increase in expenses is coming from.
Brad did mention that a lot of kids now are not just a single disability. They have multiple disabilities.
Well, if that's part of it, then fine, and if there's been,
Cost
if
of-
we're dealing with some diagnoses that are
Skyrocketed.
more expensive now than they were, but it's just not clear from the numbers that I'm seeing here.
Now, you must see also an increase in the cost of the services from year to year, too, right?
So for.
Is that dramatic?
Oh, yeah.
In some instances, yes. So that we have one program that we have students placed at that had a 23% increase in their tuition.
And there's no cap.
That is not, so we have.
Well,
we have
again,
zero
I think
control over
that's
that.
something that we've
No, I
we've
understand
tried to
that, and we
talk
tried-
with our
Legislators
legislators about.
Right. Try to see if we could get some
But
kind
we're
of
going to need,
control
I mean, we're going to need more than what's here to build a case like that. And I think there is a case to be made that if you're gonna cap our reimbursement, you ought to cap our expenses as well.
Right.
But we're going to need more data on that, and that'll be part of, I think, of the discussion of the FY16. I'd love to have you back and delve down into some of these things in the 3, 4, 6 month timeframe, but I think we're going to need to have you back before that as we put together the FY16 budget so we can understand where some of these cost drivers are coming from.
So what I'm doing right now, Mike, is I'm just taking notes. I mean, you folks are asking, I'd be happy to. But perhaps, we could summarize at the end of the meeting, just in terms of specifically what you'd like to see. And again, because this is what we talked about, perhaps having Brad back next meeting in January and breaking that down into different chunks. So I'd be happy to work with you in terms of putting that together.
Smaller chunks.
Yeah. It's.
Well, I think the initial,
today is just a lot
the
of
immediate
information.
focus is going to need to be on the budget. We need to understand where the increases are coming from, and if it's coming from it's just that it doesn't look like it's coming from a change in the population. So if there are other drivers, we need to understand
Right.
what they are.
And I remember one of the questions during one of the subcommittee meetings that we had, and I think you were there, we had brought a bunch of kids from out of district, in district, and we were hoping that the cost would transfer inside to a lower cost.
Yeah.
And here's the thing is, we brought kids from out of district in, our cost went up in district for obvious reasons, because we brought services inside, but our costs outside did not proportionately reduce at the same level. As a matter of fact, they stayed higher than what we thought. So that 23%, think about it. If you reduce your cost to $750,000, a 23% increase puts you at $1 million.
Right. Well, again, that's the thing.
$1 million. That's a 23% on a big number, and we're talking big numbers here, is a huge amount. It's like $250,000.
But based on these numbers, the out-of-district number is not going down. And in fact, the in-district number is not particularly going up.
Well, from 3 years ago, it did. From 3 years ago, we dropped like 20 students, right?
No, it was 88 in FY12, 87 in FY13, 84 in FY15.
No,
and-
if you go further
Yeah.
down from out of district versus in district, I think there was a change there. Because I looked at it.
And the in-district numbers, I mean, it may be that that's being masked by an influx of families into the town, and that we're actually moving kids from the out-of-district category into the in-district category, and at the same time, we're getting additional families move in who bring kids that fall into the out-of-district category. I can't see it from these numbers.
But I think that if we have Brad back in order to have, in order to focus on what the costs are, because we're doing the budget, then in determining that and how much it does cost with some of the out-of-district placements, we don't have to know who's going where, but if you know for the specific out-of-district placement, what that cost is, then all that information that he gets, then we can have our legislators in and we can present them with that information of the analysis that we've done based upon the information that he's given, so that we can pursue maybe something.
Well,
coming
there's
up.
some of that, but the other thing is, if our numbers of students aren't changing, and or they're going up by 2%, and our costs overall are going up by 20%, then what it means is that each, on a per pupil basis, it's getting more expensive. And once again, you can do a histogram, you can start to see, have you got a smaller population that's really exploding? Is it just everybody kind of going across the board? Is it getting more expensive to deliver services?
It's getting more expensive.
It's
to
getting more
deliver
expensive,
services.
but
We don't know that
But you
yet.
have to remember, if you look at the numbers that Brad presented, right, in FY '12, we had 34 students in private placement. In FY '15, we have 42. I know it's only 8 kids, but
No,
those
those are
but
the
those-
expensive
But
ones,
those
sure.
8 kids, those are the most expensive.
Right.
If you look at it, if they're $50,000 apiece, potentially, if you include transportation, you're almost talking $500,000. Right? I mean, the numbers are
No,
there.
we understand.
So it's only, even though it's only 8, it could be $500,000 in cost.
Depends where they go.
Yeah, depends
And
where
the
they
other
go.
expenses that they incur that we may be charged.
Well, I think, yeah, no, I agree. We need
They're
to,
private
we need,
placement.
we need to understand that. The other thing we need to understand, I think, is if you look at that private placement increase, and it's really mostly that one-year jump from FY '12 to FY '13, is that kids who are growing up into the district? Is it older kids who are moving into the district? Because that'll have some implications for our long-term, for our expected long-term expenses as well. I mean, if some of these kids are about to age out, then maybe we get lucky and regress to the mean. On the other hand, if there's been a bump up with young kids, then we know it's not going down anytime soon, and we're going to have to take that into account as we build the budget going forward.
I mean, it was my understanding, though, we try to evaluate and identify students at the youngest age possible to meet their needs, so that as they move through the system, they perhaps those needs are addressed and they won't need them for the full 12 years or whatever. My question, and I'll wait until January to get an answer, I would like you to walk us through the process of evaluation. IEP 504, when you identify what's the red flag? Does it, a teacher trigger something? Are the parents who bring them into the CHIPS program saying he needs to be evaluated, she needs to be evaluated? Who sits in on that evaluation? What are their credentials to make a determination whether or not that child should or should not receive services? I'm hearing talk of parents who now shop districts before they make their decision. We're supposed to be providing services based on need. And, I hear stories of, well, we're going to another town because they told us they'd give us this, this, and this, and Chelmsford's not going to give us that. If it's based on need, why are we ever going to say no?
It's usually the opposite. It's usually we have
It might be. I'm
folks
not-
coming in,
yeah.
but depending on the committee in terms of what you'd like to see, going forward, Brad could put together a wonderful presentation in terms of, going through the SST process, parent recommendations, staff recommendations, and so forth, because that's something that we talk about, but you folks, don't
I'd like to see it.
have the
I'd like to,
organizational understanding.
I'd like to know
You could
who's
def-
sitting at the table, what are their qualifications to be at that table, what are they, when they're recommending services, what types of services are they recommending at each age group, things like that.
And I think you saw some of that through the presentation in terms of the level of people we have, and the regular educators are part of that, and the parents are part of that team.
Right,
But-
it's just more
but-
details.
But Brad could put that piece together. But just so you know, that students aren't identified at age, we have students who are identified in 7th grade,
Right.
8th
No,
grade.
I understand.
They
But we
build
don't-
compensatory skills.
Ideally, you
and
want
they
to
make it through.
identify them as early as possible. So, perhaps
That's-
that's CHIPS. Perhaps the parent who is getting ready to put their kid in kindergarten and says, Johnny still can't count to 10. We think there might be an issue.
And and sometimes Johnny can count to 10, but then Johnny really begins to struggle in the 3rd grade, and that's when we evaluate that student.
Right.
And that student's identified as eligible for services.
Yep.
And I'm happy to expand upon that,
Yeah.
the process.
Oh,
And to your
it's a good
point earlier,
conversation.
there are several parents who will send us an IEP and say, we live here, and
Yep.
we'd like to move to Chelmsford. What will you give us if we move to Chelmsford? And we are very, very clear on, we will meet the needs of your child's IEP at the McCarthy Middle School or wherever. Some parents like that answer, some parents don't like that answer, and we never hear from them again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we get that actually very often,
Yeah.
2 or 3 a month.
Wow,
That's the reality of it.
wow.
Okay. Anything else?
Is there anybody doing virtual schools in special education in Chelmsford?
Presently, we don't have any students, but we're actually exploring that for 2 of our students right now.
All right. Brad? Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask, so is And perhaps you folks can discuss it later or get back, just in terms of a specific focus for presentation for Brad going forward.
I think we'll go around that on that one more time when we get to action items, so that we give everybody a chance to kind of be clear about what they're looking for. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from us again.
I'm sure I will, but I'm happy to do that and go into a greater level of detail.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay. Once more into the breach of the 2015-2016 academic calendar. We still need to take a final vote.
Right, and there is just one change on there, Mike, in terms of looking at the November full-day professional day. And I think we shared last go-around that next November, there's not an election on November 3rd. Typically
Right.
there is on the first Tuesday. So what we had done is we had moved it to that Monday to make it more convenient for parents. Also, too, we talked about keeping that day not in the middle of the week for our staff.
Right.
You come into school and then you'd have the day off, and then just for continuity piece.
Were we going to put Diwali on this, or were we just going to?
That was my recollection as well.
Right. It didn't appear in the minutes,
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
and I thought that we had suggested that we do that, because we have to find the dates. So
Right.
they float.
Except that Mitchell Chester knows.
And we believe it falls on Veterans Day. It should be noted as well.
Yeah. You know what? I do vaguely recall that discussion. So it needs to be noted.
Okay.
Because sometimes it's more than just one day. They made reference to 2 or 3 of a lot of other days.
Well, I believe it's a 4-day festival, but there are two
There's a
that
couple.
are
I think it's more.
particularly important.
But which 2? Is it the 10/11 or 11/12?
Looks like, so the holiday observances in Massachusetts at the DESI site for 2015-2016 lists only Wednesday, November 11th for Diwali. They have it as a single day. They have Ramadan as a month. So it's not just that they just pick a single day. The Rosh Hashanah is 2 days. Diwali they have listed as November 11th.
Okay, so since we don't have to have a day off, we can vote the calendar with just putting, with Veterans Day, if you wanted to say no school Veterans Day, and you could put Diwali in quotes in case something does come up, if it's an extra day
I
or something with the
think that's
students.
what we talked about, was just to get it into the calendar so that we were more conscious
a
of it.
placeholder.
And that we were going to have
That's
to.
all we have to do is
And
add
we're
that.
going to have another longer discussion at some point around the policy around holidays.
Sure. So we'll be happy to put that in.
Right, and I have
I'm
to
sorry,
just
that's
put it
not
under the 11th.
It was not in
Yeah.
there.
Right. So other than that, we're pretty well set on the calendar as far as I know, because I think the only thing that you brought back to us that was the major change was when we started school.
Right.
Right, we decided not to
Staff.
take that Friday off because it gives us the Friday off in June.
Right. And if there are no snow days, conceivably you could be out on the 15th for kids.
We'll see.
For us.
Sorry, what?
Don't get excited. There's going to be snow. We live in New England.
Oh.
No, I just wanted to mention that I was looking back on the minutes from previously.
Oh, thank you.
And the students that were questioning the days of Diwali did mention the 10th as well, so it was the 10th and 11th that they had asked for.
For this year or for this year? So-
This coming year, 2015. No,
Next
this
year.
year.
This year, right, 2014.
But
Let's.
it may be different for next year.
Well,
have to
again,
find
I
out.
think we, as a committee, made a decision to work with the DESI calendar. And I think what we ought to do is just leave it at that, because it's straightforward.
It's
And then
consistent.
we can have that as part of the discussion when we have a larger discussion about the policy. Do we want to restrict ourselves just to the days here, or do we need to get input
Right.
on additional days?
So we don't have any other changes except that amendment to put under November 11th, no school. Besides Veterans Day, you will also put Diwali.
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to approve the Chelmsford Public Schools 2015-2016 academic calendar as amended.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have superintendent goals. You have a draft copy, I believe, in your packets. It was also sent out as an email. Nick and Barbara were the lead subcommittee on this. Do you guys want to say anything about it to set
Can I
it
just
up?
make a motion to just get us there?
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the goals as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Do you guys want to say anything about it?
Well, I mean, if
Went over
you,
every point.
yeah, if you look, if we can go through every single line.
Right, but it would be for our benefit mostly.
It's all in front of you.
Yeah, we went through everything. I mean, obviously based upon a lot of the upheavals we've gone through, Dr. Tiano, made it a point of making sure that under professional practice goals, there are a significant amount of action items that are tailored towards the financial review process, from engaging with town administrators through the budget process, developing training profile for individual department members, engaging in munis training and budget training with the administrative team, abiding by suggested forensics audit, the auditor, in other words, in detail stuff specifically to a lot of the issues that came about in the last 4 to 5 months, and making sure that those things are being addressed, and they will happen. They're going to happen this year because they're all goals that have to be completed by the end of this school year. So.
And also, too, to put some context around it, you folks have been through this process before in terms of, contractually looking at the state evaluation for superintendents. It's similar to that of the teachers and that of the administrators throughout the district. And the goals are tied to different areas. The first one is a student learning goal, which is tied to our goals through the standards. On the last page, you do have just an outline of the standards. As you know, there are 4 standards. And we can go through again at a different point in the year in terms of looking at the whole evaluation process. As you know, it's a 5-part cycle, starting with the self-assessment, looking at the goal setting, implementation of the plan, and so forth. And we're getting these half year in terms of just the timing of what we've been doing. But at the same time, these are items that we've been working on collectively. They're tied to our strategic plan, our district improvement plan, and tied to the standards as well. So these are not the only 4 things we're working on, but as you look at your district improvement plan, and then you zoom in a little bit more and tie into the different standards that we're focused on for this particular year. For example, the district improvement goals, one is tied to MTSS, which is one of our main focus for the school year. So obviously, you'd have a district improvement goal tied directly to that. So you can see those 2, and just to share that entire context with you. And again, the evaluation piece as well. Last year, I provided you evidence in a which is just example snapshots in time in terms of the evaluation piece. We'll have that online for you at your request this year. We'd be happy to hear that piece.
In view of earlier discussion this evening, could we add in as an action step to consider the staffing of the Chelmsford High School Learning Commons?
It's a good idea.
Make that a separate goal or an action step, or?
Well,
You put it
it's
as an
easy.
action
It's
step
easy
and
as
a
an action
professional-
step. I mean,
professional practice goal.
it's a neutral statement. It's just a.
Right.
Well, that'd be at the discretion of the committee as well. I mean, is that for?
Right, I think that considering it, since we've had so much discussion over it, it's something that can be looked at in terms of how it can be structured, because you're focused on budget. So you have to take a look and see how it's going to be structured as if we're going to fund it.
For next year.
2016.
Yeah,
So you have to evaluate it, and you have to go through that.
But I thought we had this discussion already where we had all agreed that in the FY16 budget, we were gonna try to get everything back in there and try to recover.
That has been the gist of previous conversations. Yeah, I mean, until it happens, it's. What, I guess that's what,
Well, I brought that up at another meeting, and I don't remember the exact context, but it didn't sound as positive in the response I got at that time.
But I think that one of the things in developing the budget, because these are going to go online when people take a look at what we're going to do. And so it will be in black and white and clear that we're doing it, rather than just verbalizing that we want to do this. And it has, somewhere along the line, we got to put down someplace that we were actually doing, besides just the minutes, that we're doing that as a consideration. So in the development of the budget, when it talks about creating a new budget process, well, we're developing the budget. So in putting it as, say, number 10, or you can put it in and renumber them or something or other, because it's a position we want to reconsider, or we want to take a look at it, we want to make sure it's there so people know that we're going to look at it.
Is it only with respect to the one position, not the MCAS tested subjects?
I thought it was all three.
Yeah.
I thought that was the objective. I mean,
And the other piece of it as well, too, when you go to a needs-based budget, we're reconsidering or considering math teachers.
Right.
We'll be considering, so, I mean, you could specifically put that down, but at the same time, coming from, you know, our
And I just want to just interject here. The one thing we need to be very, very careful of is trying to tailor specific positions, and only because when we put in for a needs-based budget, our budget this year is roughly, the new advised budget, 50,700,000, is that what it is, Frank?
It's 50 million even.
Oh, 50 million even, no, with the
yes,
revised,
with
it's
the
700,000.
That's right.
So, we may, I'm not, please don't quote me on this, but we may have a significantly higher number when we come up with a needs-based budget. At that point, it's not going to be automatic. We're going to have to negotiate with the town manager, and so there's going to be a bunch of give and take and, you know, trying to figure out where we are. So for us to, you know, specifically stick a specific requirement on him for a specific position may be premature.
Like
I
full-day
think-
kindergarten?
Well,
What's that?
Like full-day kindergarten?
that's where I'm going next. If this flies, then I want full-day kindergarten in there, too.
Exactly. Well, see,
Right.
but that's my point. We can add all we want back in, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a negotiation process. As I sit here in front of you, I'm going to tell you that there will be, because the number, I'm going to.
We don't know that, but
we don't,
we can
but-
make an assumption, and there's all kinds of assumptions you can make, and it isn't, I mean, that's what we used to do. You put it in, and then you had to cut, and everybody's going, what do you cut? And it's all like virtual out there somewhere in space.
Exactly.
But as far as that, to add something like that in there, it isn't that you're adding the specific position back, but it's dealing with having, in terms of those individuals, that whatever the responsibilities were, can be restructured. You know, it's kind of like if we want to talk about library, it isn't that you have to have that as a department head, but you would want maybe a certified librarian or whatever it is that you're required for NEASC and that kind of thing. So it's a different piece, and it may be less money. So, but the pieces is to have the placeholder with the positions, including the other positions. We don't have to specify just library.
Right.
But any positions that were reduced, cut, or eliminated in the FY 15 budget would be looked at and considered. And that covers quite a bit of territory, including the library
Absolutely.
position.
Right.
And I'd love to consider it for this year. I mean, you know, those aren't positions that we let go because we didn't need them. So I would say that would be an automatic consideration. If you'd like to put them there,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
I think that if you just have that
Because
as a
that's-
placeholder, just because.
that's what we've talked
A lot of
about
people are talking about it, and because
previously.
not everybody's paying attention to what we're verbalizing, if something's in writing.
Well, I didn't make,
So in terms of,
I'm sorry, go right ahead.
in terms of a measurement for that particular action item, I'd love some suggestions on that.
Yeah, I don't think we want to, following what you said, I don't think we want to say will restore as an action item. We want to say something along the lines of will investigate or will propose.
You can
Right, I
evaluate
mean,
the
as
positions
the
Yes,
budget-
and
I mean, I
analyze
don't
the
remember the
budget.
exact
gets
wording, but
built.
I didn't say anything about
Right.
librarian or any specific position. My
So if we
idea
just-
was to look at the structure of the, how we're going to structure the library. And, you know, if we listen to the comments earlier tonight, there's a perception, whether it's real or not, that there's been, over a period of time, for lack of a better term, a power struggle between two different elements in the community. And I think it's important, if that is the case, and the perception was there, I mean, she didn't mince any words.
And then she engaged in it, yes.
Well,
I hear what you're saying. And
I think it's important to make a decision of what direction we want to go in. And if it happens to be to restore the librarian and X number of aides or whatever it is, I just think this has opened up the situation that how are we going to put together the learning commons? And I think it's kind of important.
Al, it's extremely important,
Yeah.
and that's what Charlie's doing. That's what our coordinators are doing in terms of our staff, in terms of a needs-based budget. And that's, so
If it's being done, then you got it all set. You don't need to worry
Right,
about it.
so I'm with you on that. I'm
Yeah.
just, it seems like a narrow focus for something, that's what we're doing at
That's the purpose of a needs-based budget.
That's what we're doing at the Biden School.
Right,
That's what we're doing
there's
at
two,
the
there
McCarthy School.
are
At least that was my opinion.
kind of two groups that don't have an advocate in the budget process right now, right? That's,
Who's that?
one would be the coordinators, where the positions got removed. Just
gotta
because,
disagree.
just
I gotta
because they're
disagree.
not.
A needs-based
they're not
budget means
there.
he needs
And
those
the other
positions.
one that isn't there is the full-day kindergarten, right? And so I think in both cases.
But that is.
There's some desire to make sure that those get explored. And I think I'd be more interested in something like that.
I'm unclear of the discussion.
When
No,
it
no,
says.
I think what Mike is trying to say is, you're totally off base when you talk about coordinators, because the coordinators are a function, and as well as the librarian is a function that we need in this district, period. Okay? So when
No
we
one's
put a
disputing that.
needs-based budget together, they go back in. Okay? Now, how it gets all laid out from a budget standpoint is a different situation, because it might have to be negotiated. When it comes to kindergarten, everybody around this table agrees that it's something we're going to do, but it's separate. And we said we were going to keep it separate because of how we had to fund it, okay? And the assistant superintendent was going off, looking at a grant, okay? Looking at other potential monies. Then maybe we even had some money in reserve. I mean, that was a whole process that we go through. And to change in midstream now is just almost insane. Until we get all the final numbers and we know what the dollar values are and where we can, after everything that we've gone through, I mean, we're just going to be, I'm sorry, we're going to be rubbing salt in the wound at this point, okay? We understand.
I thought we
and I'm a
heard
big proponent
that was a need, that it was not a wish list, that it's the considered judgment of the administrative team, that's where we are now.
Did this team not sit here less than a month ago and say, and again, I'm in support, I want this, but did we all come back and say as a team that we're going to put this on hold until we found out exactly where the other finances that were available?
And
I mean,
now
did
we have some feedback on the other finances,
We have one
right?
thing and we need another one,
100.
right?
Right.
Well, I mean, how much longer are we going to wait on it?
What you've asked us to do, I believe, and what we're planning on doing is we're developing our budget. You develop a level service needs-based budget, and then you develop what the cost would be for kindergarten. We were putting that
correct.
Well, if you say level service,
right?
Well, we don't have those coordinator positions in the current services.
No. A needs-based.
You know what? Can
Maybe
I
we've
have Al?
accomplished what our intent was, because we brought up at least three major things that need to be part of that preliminary budget, in my opinion. And so by discussing it tonight, if they're not there, we've made.
My understanding, okay, this is the way I understand it, and God love it, but, and I want this, believe me, I want this to happen. Come April, first week of April, I won't be sitting in the seat anymore, but the reality is, okay, that there was $437,000 that was pulled out of our budget. We had to take out because of the financial situation. My thought, or my belief for a needs-based budget and level service is to bring that all back. To get us back to a real level service, because we reduced the services. You understand what I'm saying? So a level service budget and our needs budget are gonna come together, okay?
We have a level service budget, but the needs budget is the things that we have reduced or cut from before in order to have a real number of what it's going to cost to educate kids,
Including the attrited positions?
including all of the positions that had been cut in the FY15 budget, because it
Right.
was cut for, as a budget thing.
right.
You made a comment about who's
Including-
responsible.
Including the positions that were not filled. Right?
The $437,000 of
Yes,
cuts.
he had to cut it in order to make it balance.
Right.
All of that stuff, we got to figure it out.
I'm saying that $437,000.
There was other positions.
Right, and you're
Correct.
saying that those should go in as well.
Well,
to
he
a level-
determines that-
If,
to a
If-
level
if-
service.
when they build it, because you may,
But
might,
that's where it comes into a difference between where we're at and the need. The superintendent may very well see, within
maybe
that
other
400 and
needs.
something $1,000, that the need can be met, but in a different way. It's
Yeah,
it's
right.
possible.
Right.
we've always looked at things differently
So,
in order to meet
So
the
to
money.
say that, I mean, that's where the negotiation kind of thing that you're talking about comes in.
Yeah.
You can say, we're going to take the $400,000 and put everything back the way it was,
Well-
but that may not meet needs the best way.
Correct.
But that's.
Right.
But we have to be as close to level services budget as possible. We
and maybe-
can't just, we can also open the spigot and turn that, 50 million to.
nobody's talking about a
No,
spigot.
you're not doing that,
We're not
because
doing
with,
that.
with not
And
having,
I know you're not, so.
with not
Well,
having a handle
I
on
think
what
we
the
can
numbers
cut
were
this
before, you're
down
gonna watch.
because, in my opinion, and I don't know if the other people that spoke agree, but I think by having this discussion, we've highlighted areas of significant concern to the community and to the school committee, and let's go.
And we expect, right, with the understanding or the expectation that we'll see a discussion
Yeah.
of those. Sure. I am comfortable with that.
Okay, and you had made a brief comment about who's representing what, but we already have under procedures, in terms of where any of those positions were, you have individuals that are responsible for those particular areas. So you want to take a look at the procedure list that Frank put together for us, so that when you're coming forward with wherever
And
those
determine the
positions were,
FY16
you have
budget.
people that are responsible for creating that budget. It's all right here. So we know.
Okay.
Because you made a comment about who's going to represent it, we know it's in
I-
here.
And I
was-
think you
yeah,
have
I-
advocates in all of us.
I was thinking
terms
more
of
of
putting that
advocacy,
together.
but that's fine. Okay. Well,
Sorry for the dead.
No,
now,
it had to be.
do you
it had
do you
to
have
be
any
said.
further
Obviously,
discussion
if you-
for us?
If you're.
I
if
do
you're-
not. I would like to
Would you like to
present my
move the
original-
question?
I would like to present my original motion to accept the superintendent's goals as presented.
All right, we have a motion, it's been seconded. If there's no further discussion, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
5-0. Okay, we have a late-breaking field trip in your packets, I believe.
We do.
Yeah.
And this is it's for our hockey team, and they are playing in a tournament. And you have the dates there. It's down in Falmouth, December 26th and 27th. And you have the right,
Okay, so let me look at yours.
I believe this is a
'Cause I took
regular,
mine-
this is an annual,
regular trip.
annual.
And because of the location and everything,
No, I mean my
in my
packet.
opinion, it makes a lot of sense to stay over.
Absolutely, they've done this for
So I
several
move
consecutive years.
that we approve the hockey trip to Falmouth from the night of the 26th to the 27th of December, 2014.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you. All right, policy. We have 6 in the queue. They are all financial policies, and we're just waiting to get some feedback from you, right, Frank? You have copies of the policies?
Okay. I have copies of policies, and I'll review those.
They should be in your
What
email.
I would like to do is concentrate on the budget right
Sure.
now, if we could.
Yep.
And get beyond that, and
Okay.
then talk about policies.
That's fine. So maybe we'll, all right. So we won't bring those back again next time.
But we
There are
should
other policies
later
that we can load into the
Not
queue, I
going away.
believe. Yeah, they're not going away. They're in the queue.
So the practice will inform the policies.
Right. Okay, liaison reports of finance subcommittee.
We spoke about it.
Yeah, you guys pretty much went through everything.
And we're actually talking about our next meeting, which is either, well, we may be doing it during the holiday. Maybe. Depends upon what Glenn says.
All right.
Christine doesn't like me, so she just wants me out of the house. It doesn't matter.
A lot of responsibility in the company.
The policy subcommittee, you're just sitting on the 6 in the queue. Maintenance subcommittee.
We were
meeting
supposed to get
schedule?
together, but there have been
There's been a lot of
continuous discussions via email in regards to problems that have been going on from a temperature control standpoint in the schools, and we've bantered back and forth with Kathleen and Gary. They have been in the schools. It's still unsatisfactory. We still have to try to resolve what those problems are. I've made some comments. I know they've gotten back, comments as in suggestions, in trying to make some resolutions. I sent a couple of more today, but I haven't heard back from Kathleen to see if some of those things could happen from a programming standpoint. But she does make some interesting points, and she is correct on how, I wasn't sure how the rule was on bringing air in versus.
On the makeup
right,
air,
right,
yeah.
right.
That's,
And she has some information to send back. I'm not sure if that was, I talked with her today, but via email.
Yeah, she sent some information back to make some clarifications, but I think what they really do is they have to make some adjustments on the higher end.
And I believe they are. I don't want to talk out of turn, but you got to rectify that situation. That's, I'll check in with you.
But we need to set up a meeting as well to follow up with that. I think with everything else going on and
Crazy.
Right.
it's insane.
well, I mean, right, that's an important one, but there's other things going on as well. We still need to have a conversation about the overall pod conditions, that sign for the pack.
Okay.
Right? Just stuff like that. And I think, again, we saw it's good to sit down with that team and make sure that
One
everybody's.
thing Gary pointed out is those letters that are built into the roof.
Yeah.
They're on there, so we're probably realistically, we're probably gonna do something else.
Okay.
One quick thing, just to let you know, our next subcommittee for
Finance.
is going to be January 6th at
7.
7:30 in the morning.
It seemed to work out well because then we meet and we have the discussion and stuff and bring forward all the questions and the information in the evening. And then if we do it if we have to have the morning of every school committee meeting or something like that.
Evelyn is just being nice. She's just saying that I'll remember fresh in my mind for that day, because if I wait one day, I'll probably forget. So.
Okay.
It's not Monday.
That,
True.
Not a Monday.
that brings me to action items. Athletic activity, I have a number of things outstanding from the last meeting. Athletic activity accounts, we were waiting for the expenditures, and that account, those were to be posted. That appears to have been done on the high school, it's the high school site again? Or I'm sorry, the business.
It's on every,
Site.
it's on every page of the website,
Okay,
actually.
all right, fine. You know what, more is better. A warrant handbook, I'm gonna meet with Frank tomorrow morning, and that'll be one of the things we talk about. Substitute report, I think you saw it today. If there are additional follow-ups on that, I'll ask you to do that individually, until it becomes an issue. IEP reports, I think we went through that pretty thoroughly today.
No.
Just in general, the special ed presentation, we were looking for breakdowns of the identifications. We reiterated that tonight. You're going to follow up on some of the loads as well, but I think that can come off of the action item list if people are comfortable with that.
You're looking, I'm sorry, a breakdown of the numbers of IEPs?
The identifications, year-over-year trends going back.
Right.
He provided
Okay,
the
yes.
FY 14-15 numbers, but not previous numbers, and that's one of the things we want to look at.
Right, and I just heard process too from Barbara as well.
Yeah.
Timing.
Yeah, that's a new one, right?
Yeah.
Is how to do, okay,
He
you wanna,
said he's coming back in January, so.
That's not far off.
This is like the latest meeting we've ever had.
okay, the answers to Regina Jackson and Claire Janot's questions, you have my initial draft It's waiting for some information. I'm going to take that off of this action item list for now. We'll follow up probably in a month.
Because some of those answers will come out with the audit,
Exactly.
and then we just put them in there.
And, right.
You already
and-
have the template for
Right,
what you need.
exactly. And so some of them, there were a couple of questions from Ms. Janot about individuals on the committee and their knowledge of things. So if you want to just start writing down your own thoughts on it, we can collate them when we issue the final response. The question of meetings, this is going to take a little bit. There's a tri-board meeting that's been called for January 12th, as of last night. That's the Monday after our first meeting in January. That leaves, luckily, January 13th open for us to have a public input session on the Sullivan report. Is that acceptable to people? And if not, are there alternative dates?
When did they say it was the 12th?
The 12th is a tri-board meeting,
At what time?
7, here.
That doesn't work for me, but it doesn't matter. I don't make the decision on that one.
Well, I've missed them in the past.
Yeah.
They've made them when I've been out of town. No input.
So then
Well-
we would have a meeting on January 6th. We would have a public input session on the 13th
For the audit,
for the, to hear community reactions to the audit.
I can be here for the 13th. I cannot do the tri-board meeting.
Okay, I think the topic of discussion there will largely be the Sullivan report.
Right.
Pat indicated that Paul expects to have some initial numbers, but it's unlikely that there's going to
Not
be
in terms
much in
of
the way
budget,
of guidance.
right, but if we have...
He's aware of our process as well, so, I mean, he's not looking to have a final
But we
set
said
of
we'd have a
numbers.
separate open session to discuss the report.
Well, that's right. So that would be the 13th. Then the 20th is our regularly scheduled meeting. The 27th would be a workshop, I think, for us.
On 27.
To walk through the FY16 budget. I am not anticipating public input at that because I don't believe there will be anything to respond to yet. That the 27th will be when we promulgate the preliminary budget. So then we have a regularly scheduled meeting on February 3rd. And February 10th then might be a good time to have public input
On the preliminary budget.
preliminary FY16 budget.
Because the next week is February vacation.
The next week is February vacation, and then the 24th, we have another regularly scheduled meeting.
At least if we get it all in the, it's like every Tuesday.
Yeah,
It is every Tuesday, yes.
About the 6th. I may be in DC. I don't know if I'm going to be going on the 7th or the 6th, because I just looked at my
can
calendar.
move
Does anybody have serious objections to that calendar?
No.
Just put it in a placeholder.
Okay.
So we have,
I
we
will-
have school committee meeting like every week in January and February.
Why not combine the January 27th and January 20th meeting of the school committee and have it on the 27th?
Well, do we just
well,
want to focus on the budget?
Yeah, I think the question is how long we want to spend on the budget. If tonight's any indication of it, I think we're going to need the entire evening to kind of ask questions and walk through.
So my suggestion is on the 20th, it would be, any budget stuff is just initial. But on the
Well, we might
27th,
still-
would go really into
Well,
it.
we might hear, I don't expect to have the preliminary budget on the 20th. If we hear anything about the budget on the 20th, I would expect it to be the FY15.
There's no
Well,
way.
the FY15
There's no way.
budget.
Right. But I mean, as far as having an extensive amount.
Yeah, I
of
don't think
time.
we're gonna have any discussion about the FY16 budget on the 20th. It just, people need the time. Right?
We had a discussion that the 27th is like.
I know,
that's
I know,
like,
we're not trying to push it up.
You know? Then
Okay.
we're gonna be tight. Now you're trying to pull it in by a week. I'm like, oof.
All
Yeah.
right, that's, so that's our upcoming
But
schedule.
it was-
Get your rest over the holidays.
You just hit, in February, we're meeting the 10th and
Not the 17th,
Yeah,
the
that's
10th and then the
vacation.
24th,
Okay.
right?
And the 10th is any specific purpose?
February, no, just a regularly scheduled meeting.
And the 24th the same?
Also, oh.
No, you had, one of those was an open
Oh, I'm
session. to
sorry, you're
discuss-
right. We had an open, the
That's the
10th, maybe
10th.
we are not meeting on the 10th is the public input on the
Public
preliminary
input,
budget.
Okay.
I'm getting
February 10th.
confused, on February 10th, because the 3rd is a regularly scheduled
Right.
meeting, and then we're skipping the 17th because it's vacation week,
Okay.
and we'll push out to the 24th. And of course, we'll take public input at any regularly scheduled meeting if people want to come and discuss it once the preliminary budget goes out. Okay. Breakdown of participation in various clubs via activity fees.
Got it.
No, he's got the,
And-
he had the different, something different, right?
And you were going to look into that, I think.
Right. We were talking in terms of the activity fees and how that's broken down. We're not 100% there yet, Frank, are we?
No.
No.
By the way,
Yes.
I did neglect one thing, and even though I sent an email out.
Oh, I'm
to
sorry,
everybody,
I forgot
there
to ask
was
you.
one more thing, I
All
apologize.
right, yeah, why don't you do this real fast?
Okay, so this is real quick.
This is the update on the
This is
capital
update on the
budget.
capital plan. So I did send an email out after our discussion last week. The capital budget request that we made to the capital committee was approved, as well as everything else that was approved on the list. I think the process went well. One thing that I, just as advice to the committee, because I've been doing this thing for the last 3 years, is that the next 2 years are real heavy years in general. I mean, if you look at the calendar, there's like 4 million in next year, the following year's plan, and then 4 million the following year after that. And I know that they're not going to allocate 4 in each of those years. It's just fact. So really need to, Dr. Tiano and I had a quick discussion in regards to, over the next couple of months, we need to sit down and look at the next 5 years rolling out from all the different principles, what the principals' needs are, and making sure where everything falls into play. You know, I can give my input based upon everything I've seen in the last 3 years, but I think it's important to know that. But the process went well. Everyone agreed to everything. We got what we needed, and we just marched forward. I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad you remembered. I just missed that. All right, the question about the MASC governance project, bringing in MASC to do a workshop for us. I spoke with Glenn Kuchar. He suggested that we could do a workshop on kind of the fiduciary responsibility of school committees, and kind of do it concurrently with the MASBO review of our practices. So all we need is an open date in January or February or March.
January, come on.
I mean, I'm,
Realistic.
well, again, if the committee's comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with pushing that out until March.
Well, you need to
They
first
can
get
come
what
on
MASBO's.
short notice.
You need to get what MASBO's commitment is first and find out when they're available, and then we can figure it out, so.
How
we
long
could-
did they say they needed?
MASBO was guesstimating 4 to 6 weeks.
That's what I thought, 6 weeks.
Right, so if we're 6
But
weeks.
they're not necessarily going to spend all their time with us.
Okay.
Right, they're going to be looking at practices and talking to people in the school office, in the town office, and kind of benchmarking. I don't think we don't necessarily have to wait for that, but the fact is, we don't have a lot of time in January or February to do another workshop.
Right,
So-
well, there is a date that I am doing a Division I meeting, and that's the 29th of January. and you can piggyback on that because that's all budget. It's a division meeting, it's not our workshop, but they're going to be doing a workshop on, a discussion.
This would be a workshop for this committee. And so, I mean, there's nothing that keeps people from going to the Division One meeting.
No, true.
But I'm gonna leave that on there.
Okay.
And we'll talk about it some more as we get a little bit closer, and I would say, if you want to do it in January or February, take a look at your calendars and see what's available, because our Tuesdays are full.
Just one thing I'd suggest there, Mike, too, as we're going to work with John Sullivan.
Yes.
And implement his procedures.
Right.
It'd be difficult to have somebody come in and audit what we're doing as we're implementing procedures for the first time.
I think we'll want to talk to MASBO about that, and I think we'll see how flexible they are. We're not going to put it off until next year.
Oh, God, no.
We have
No.
I mean,
I was saying at least a month or two we won't hear from Mr. Sullivan until another couple of weeks in an official capacity, and then to be able to make those adjustments as opposed to have someone come else in and make those adjustments.
Well, my view of the MASBO audit is that it's going to look at much more than just our business office. In fact, I hope the focus will be more on the interrelation between the business office, the committee, the town business office, and maybe even like FinCom and the town manager, and kind of get a global perspective of what best practices are in terms of communications. I thought the town accountant sent out a very nice article a couple of weeks ago that talked about various roles and responsibilities. It was a little old, but reading through it, I thought there was an awful lot of good stuff in it, a number of very good suggestions, and if we come away with something like that from MASBO, I'd be quite happy with that, so that everybody kind of understood their role in how the school budget fits into the town budget and the responsibilities that all of the different people and organizations have as we create that. We'll continue to talk to them as well. There was a request last time for a breakdown of the maintenance work done at each school. Right? We saw a breakdown of the various chores done by the maintenance department.
Kathleen was going to get us a breakdown of the, in other words, trying to determine which school has the most issues.
Okay.
So that right now doesn't have an assignment. Do you want me to take that as a request to Kathleen?
No, we'll
to assign it.
My plan was that we present that at the next maintenance meeting. Subcommittee maintenance.
So we'll call that a maintenance subcommittee thing. Okay, that's fine. There was a request last time that I make sure that the committee that the liaison assignments were online and up to date. I believe they are now online. However, there may be one, we'll call it a typo. Did you two switch responsibility for the high school PTO? I think I've still got. Yeah. Okay.
I was at the Byam and I'm at the high
Right.
school.
I did not get that, so I will send another update. But it is there on the school committee webpage now. It's a link there. Okay, from tonight, I have to post the activity account reconciliations to the appropriate school webpage. So we saw the high school report
some point we'll
tonight,
have McCarthy
and we'd
and
like to
Parker.
put that on the high school site. Then when the McCarthy and Parker reconciliations become available, we'd be posting them monthly on those school sites so that the people who are, the families who are there can get a look at them. I have a request. The activity accounts that are posted right now appear to cover 2 pages instead of 1. So
Do it on a monthly basis.
So they're laid out as a landscape view, and the last column, which is the column with all the numbers in it, is cut off.
Oh.
So it comes through on a second page. So if we could
Reformat.
yeah, if we could just reformat those so that the numbers are attached to the accounts. We have a request that we get a further presentation on the process for creating IEPs.
Or any services, special ed services. But
For-
you can use IEP as an example, but.
Well, I'd
rather.
rather try to be specific,
Okay.
services, so that we don't overlook anything. I'm looking for an explanation of really an explanation of the increase that we're seeing in our sped expenses.
When he comes in January and does a further examination based upon the numbers that we have for the FY16 budget, I think it'll give us the information we're looking
Gotta
for.
know a lot of that.
I mean,
do
I
the
think it's
budget.
just too much redundancy at this point. I mean,
So you think okay, that's fine.
I mean, if he's gonna come in
I
in
don't
January,
mind I don't mind not making that a specific item. Are there
Wait,
other?
Just ask a question. Aren't we gonna review those numbers when we have the budget discussion at the end of January? And we asked
Right, but he
Brad
needs-
to come in?
Right, but the pieces, if we have a better understanding of where those numbers come from, we may have other questions that will be generated as a result of it, rather than waiting until the last minute to ask the questions in case there need to be any changes or adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, anything that could, the meeting on the 27th could be a long one. And
Not-
there
not like
might be,
tonight.
and there might be some action items generated out of that.
There's a lot.
Were there any other specific requests for action items tonight?
Please.
I don't know if it's an action item. I will take the subcommittee minutes and make sure that Debbie gets those with any attachments and stuff, because they gotta go in the book. We have a book of minutes.
Yeah, okay.
So since I'm doing the other minutes,
Okay,
I'll make sure
that's
that
fine.
the other minutes get to where they're supposed to be.
That's fine. Okay. All right. If there are no other action items, that brings us to press questions.
Hi, Alana Melanson, Lowell Sun. I unfortunately wasn't able to make the last couple of meetings, so I apologize if anything I'm about to ask was previously addressed. But first of all, given some of the discussion earlier tonight, I'm just wondering, was there ever any consideration on the part of the school department or school committee to ask town meeting for additional funding to reinstate the 3 positions that were laid off? Anybody want to take that one up?
There was some mention at the tri-board meeting. I know Tom Gilroy and I asked.
Yeah, I don't believe there was ever an explicit plan advanced. I think the discussion at the tri-board meeting revolved around that the request could be amended, but now I'm not so sure about that.
I can't remember.
Can you amend a request like that up? I believe you can, in fact.
It could have at
because-
town meeting.
It could have been a town meeting.
Yeah, so if there'd been a desire, it could have been done as an amendment at town meeting. I believe that's how we left it at the tri-board meeting.
Okay, why wasn't that included in the school department's request for funding to town meeting?
You would, well, again, we left it, I think, explicitly as a option for for town meeting to take up.
So you left it up to the town meeting reps to
Make an
make an
amendment.
amendment?
Yeah.
Because you gotta get the money from somewhere. They had appropriated all of the money that we had asked. I think we also had maybe an unstated opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, in that the magnitude of what we were asking for was so great
Yeah,
that we didn't want to go any further.
that might even have been stated. Perhaps not directly related to that, but yeah, I think it's fair to say that there was some concern about bringing in the
right.
lowest reasonable request or the lowest possible
To get
request
into the next year.
and leaving that as an option for others.
And I mean, most of you on the committee, if not all of you, are town meeting reps, right? So one of you
Only
could
3
have.
of us are.
3 of you, okay.
3 of
Did any of you who are town meeting reps consider bringing it up as an amendment at town meeting?
I didn't.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I did not, because of the magnitude of the number that we were looking at the time, and to ask for an additional $437,000 to add back into the budget of the amount that was reduced for us to get to even where we were, you know, we were struggling just begging for what we had, you know? I mean, you saw what happened at the meeting. I mean, everyone was upset in the amount of money.
And for the others who are town meeting reps,
No, I didn't consider bringing it up.
I'm not a town meeting rep.
No, and I didn't consider it at that point in time, only on the basis of what was discussed at the school committee, that we had, by consensus, decided that we would wait to reinstate that on the following fiscal year.
okay. And Al, did you have any reasons as to why that's not something that you had considered?
No. Because of all, you know, I think the thing is, the discussion that we've had repeatedly was toward reinstating things in another year. So that's where I was coming from.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. When do the school department and or school committee expect to receive the audit report from John Sullivan?
But we've been informed that we should have it by December 31st at this point.
Yeah, Board of Selectmen gets that. We didn't request it, so Board of Selectmen hired the auditor.
So then it would be up to them as to when they would pass it along to the school department and school committee?
Absolutely, yep.
I believe the expectation is that the tri-board meeting on the 12th
Right.
will focus on that report.
But the report will be available ahead of that.
I hope so.
You know, typically it goes to the board first, and then they could choose to release it before they meet and receive it, but I would expect actually, and I'm speculating now, I would expect that they would hear Mr. Sullivan's report. Yeah, I mean, it's really a question for them.
Well, I mean, I was curious
Right.
as to if you were promised a date as to when you would have it by.
We were told, well, I can look at the email again, but the last one I saw said that the report was expected to be completed, I believe, by December 31st, and
So you
Yeah.
would think that shortly thereafter we'll get something.
I mean, that following Monday,
This 5th.
depending on whether or not that, I would assume that first Monday, the 5th, is a meeting for the Board of Selectmen. That would be my guess, but it's a guess.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
Excuse me. And this question is directly for Nick. You said earlier in the meeting that come April you would not be in your seat. Does that mean you will not be running for
I
re-election?
announced that last Tuesday. I'm not running for re-election.
Any reason why?
Yeah, business. I started a new job 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to be out of state a lot. As a matter of fact, we just had to reschedule one of our meetings because I'm going to be in Washington again. So I'm running a division here in Billerica, and I'm running a division down in Columbia, Maryland. So it wouldn't be fair. So I've taken that position for about 18 months, and I'll really reassess that a year from now and see where we're at and see where I'm at and what's going on. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I've fallen for this. No.
I have to come back again to have a public input.
Yes.
Unless I talk to the press, which I will.
Yes, that's right. Okay, the time being 10:22, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is Tuesday, January 6th. Happy holidays.